Hello everybody, welcome into our latest live stream. It's Friday, it's the 15th of November 2024. My name is Kerry Holzman and thank you guys so much for joining us today as we begin with a brand new, just released motherboard from ASRock called the Nova. And I want you to know that if you start looking for reviews online, don't confuse this with last year's Nova. There was a 7090. That's for 13th and 14th gen Intel chips. And then there's a 890, 790 versus 890. So we're going to be one of the earliest reviews on this board. We ordered this board and paid for it back in October. It only just recently arrived. That's how fresh and new it is. I've already gone online and downloaded the latest BIOS because I'm assuming I'm going to need it. And what we're building here is essentially what I consider to be a modern best bang for the buck. We talk about this $800 price point. There are some aspects here that we went a little over the top, like the, we used the T705 Gen 5 at the previous, the 9900X build. This is the little brother, the T700. It's a Gen 5 drive. The T705 runs at over 14,500 megabytes per second. This is about 12,400. Still too expensive. If you just used a regular Gen 4, stay away from the Gen 5 drives. You likely won't notice any performance difference whatsoever. And it'll save you over $100 on the price. So if I were trying to build this to a best bang for the buck, I would not include this part. Now with regards to the RAM, we've got the Blade 5 DDR5 RGB, Blade DDR5 RGB, which we're going to look at all the parts listings here in just a moment. But the important part here is using the Ultra 7. Stay away from the Ultra 9. Stay away from the X3D series on AMD. They're well overpriced unless you're looking to build an Xbox. Now, for the rest of us looking to get work done, these are the best bang for the buck. They're the best value. It's just simple math. And you're going to need your own cooling solution for these. These are just the K processors. There's just an Ultra 5, an Ultra 7, Ultra 9, one of each. This is what Intel does every year about this time, is they release a new family of processors and give you a little taste of each level, right? The Ultra 5, Ultra 7, Ultra 9. After the new year, they'll introduce multiple Ultra 9s, multiple Ultra 7s, and multiple Ultra 5s. With regards to performance issues that people say they're having with these, there's nothing physically wrong with them. The performance differences aren't that extreme between this and the previous gen, and that's the big complaint, is why not just stick with the previous gen. An engineer at Intel says that these are actually underperforming, that there's a BIOS update and some Windows updates coming out that's supposed to fix the way these were supposed to perform. I don't know how Intel makes that mistake, but we'll just have to wait and see what happens. In the meantime, there's nothing wrong with these. There's no reason to avoid them unless it's a value proposition. But unfortunately, you can't put last year's CPU into this year's motherboard. So if you want all the benefits and features of a modern 800 series motherboard, you have no choice but to get a socket 1851 CPU, which starts with the brand new Ultra series of desktop processors that Intel just released a couple weeks ago. What do these features include, you ask? Well, that's what we're going to talk about. Oh, and this is just my Intel laminar cooler. I buy these off eBay for about 30 bucks a piece. We need something to test this outside of the bench or outside of the case to make sure everything works. I haven't yet decided what case I want to put this in or what power supply I'm going to use, because we don't normally get to that till part 2 anyway, so I've got some time to sort of evaluate what this looks like and what it's going to look best in. Everybody's got different taste when it comes to case design. Also different budgets. So we got hung up on that yesterday on the 9900X. And the solution to solving yesterday's problem was spending an additional $550. Unfortunately, what ended up happening is I wanted to build the 9900X because I believe the 9900X from AMD and the Intel Ultra 7 265K are very similar in value. They're also very similar in performance. They're very similar in every single way. I don't think you can go wrong picking either one. However, when these supposed fixes come out for this, it'll be interesting to see how the performance variation differs from where it is today. It's not a night and day situation. It's just, you know, a little bit this way, a little bit that way. And of course, AMD is always better when it comes to their onboard graphics for gaming. So if you want it for gaming, you probably want AMD. Now, with that out of the way, there's something else I wanted to tell you. Oh, we cannot use the same, if you've seen before, I've used those little contact frames that go around the CPUs. Well, we cannot use one of those from a socket 1700 onto a socket 1851. The reason is the new chips are a little taller. They look the same as far as how wide and how long they are, but they're taller. Therefore, the contact frame isn't going to work. Don't put a contact frame on here. Instead, Intel's created something called a reduced load internal loading mechanism. And that's that lever you see me lower down on the CPU. And that, they have two versions of it on the new 800 series chips. A regular ILM, which is what you always get, or an RL-ILM, and it'll say right on it. RL means it's a reduced load. And what that means is the chance of that CPU warping now is gone away 100%. It just won't happen anymore with the way Intel redesigned it. And those contact frames, even though I thought they were a waste of money before, they're still a waste of money now because Intel's remedied that potential. I don't know anybody who actually suffered from that, but it's sort of a solution regardless if you know, it removes that potential and negating the need for that particular part. And if you look, you'll see there are no contact frames for socket 1851. You'd actually probably be making the situation worse. This motherboard has that RL-ILM, reduced load internal loading mechanism. So by replacing that with a contact frame, we'd be making it worse unnecessarily. In the meantime, the CPU coolers that work on socket 1700, that previous generation, those still work okay here. Even though the CPU is a little bit taller, there's no issue. According to Noctua, they say everything that we make still works and is 100% compatible with the new 1851. So that feels like a little bit of double talk. Like, how could the chip be taller and we're still, you know, not putting too much pressure from the cooler on it? But, you know, it's coming from a reputable source. This is from Noctua, and I have no doubt that when it comes to cooling manufacturers, they know what they're talking about. They might be overpriced for what you get, but they're very good at what they do. So I believe what they say to be true. Do you? Well, that's up to you. Thank you to Mark Gaines joining us in the chat room from Northern Ireland for his Amazon gift card prior to the show starting. Hello and shout out to our friend Buster. Peter Laycock joining us there from Bonnie, Scotland. And Peter contributes, as soon as I find it, give me a second, my chat room's going crazy. Everybody's saying hello, welcome in everybody. Planet Cryos with a $2 super chat. He says, start with or without me. Hey everyone. It looks like Planet Cryos just recently put up a new video today as well. Be sure and check out his YouTube channel if you haven't already. There's Buster saying, good evening, Carrie and Marlena and everyone in the chat. All the best from Bonnie, Scotland. The temperature in Edinburgh is 53 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 11.6 degrees Celsius. A little warmer. We're getting down into the 60s this coming week, so it should get more like fall here in late November here in Phoenix. Thank you, Buster. Nick Caffrey with a €10 super chat says, hello, Carrie and Mara and everyone in the chat. Cold weather is on its way in Ireland. I bet. Gerardo Quintana Roo renews membership, now a member for 30 months, and says happy Friday. Thank you, Gerardo. Rick Lakes with a $5 super chat says hello. Speaking of cold, Rick Lakes is out there in Minnesota. Thank you, Rick. What else? What else am I missing? Davis Parsons renews membership, now a member for 30 months as well. Look at that. Amazing. Where has the time gone, Davis asks. I want to see those numbers change over to 60. You'll long for the days of when it was only 30. No, we really, really appreciate you sticking with us that long, and that, you know, that's right from the beginning. There's only a handful of you that started out early and have stayed with us, and we appreciate each and every one of you. And of course, all the new members and our regular viewers and new viewers are all welcome. Please, please join us in the chat during today's show. This is an interactive show. It is meant for us to talk back and forth, not for me to just talk to you. And yeah, you know what? We may not always agree, but that doesn't mean anybody has to get mean or nasty. You know, just be kind, and you're certainly welcome to voice your own opinion, and you're certainly more than welcome to say as much. Hey, this is my opinion. You're wrong. Okay. Versus just, you're wrong. That's kind of rude. But anyway, we certainly love the kindness and consideration and decorum that this community affords not only myself, but everybody in it. And that's what makes it so welcoming. If you're welcoming, you'll be treated the same. And we would love to see this community continue to grow with that type of viewer, that type of participant who really enjoys the interactive part, because there's not many YouTube channels that interact with their audience as much as I do. And we would, if you're not interacting with me or with other members of the chat, you're missing 50% of the enjoyment of the channel. Just going to tell you right now. So if you're watching these videos after they air, you should make an effort to get here when they're live. We always air live at 1 o'clock p.m. Phoenix time, which is 12 p.m. Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern time. And we'd love to have you here. Now I realize it's like 9 o'clock at night in the Netherlands, as Doman 2000 mentions, and 6:10 a.m. in the morning for Paul Gray in Australia. So what can you do? But we appreciate the updates, guys, and thank you so much. Thank you to Paul Gray as well for his generosity in supporting the channel, so we can maintain a freedom here to review the products we want to review without any contracts or scripts. Everything is live and unrehearsed. And all the products I'm reviewing, I'm genuinely interested in for the business side of what I do, which is selling and repairing and upgrading computers, primarily to businesses. Now this machine that we're doing today, the Phantom Gaming Z890 Nova, obviously it has gaming in the name, but that doesn't mean you have to use it for that. But it does mean you're going to pay a little more for it. That's the bottom line. The minute they add the word gaming to anything, you're going to be paying a few dollars more because you're a gamer. That's just how it works. If you're in it for business, you'll get a lot more value for your money. That being said, let's take a look at today's parts. So looking at, first of all, this exciting new motherboard from ASRock. And I was really fired up to get this because, well, let me just show you and you decide if you think it's as cool as I think it is. Never mind the gaming aspect of it. It's a very attractive board. It kind of has a purple and black look here. You can see the socket frame, or the socket, the CPU socket, looks the same to the naked eye. But trust me, only the newest Intel CPUs will fit in there. Others will not fit. And again, don't waste your money on contact frames. This board does have the reduced load. This piece, this metal piece right here in the middle of the board, that's our internal, or I think it's internal loading mechanism. And so Intel makes two different kinds for the new chips. You get just a regular ILM, and then you get the RL, reduced load ILM. This motherboard comes with the reduced load ILM. This is really only a factor for people that overvolt and overclock, causing the chip to heat up so much it could warp. This removes that opportunity of warpage. We don't do that, so I wouldn't go out of your way to get the reduced load ILM, but if your motherboard has it, yeah, bonus. As we scroll down and look at some of these specs, we could be here for the next 90 minutes just talking about everything this board has, which I'm not going to do, but suffice to say, we do have a Gen 5 socket. On top of that, we have this giant heatsink right here, right at the bottom third of the board. And underneath of that are 4 more M.2 slots, which is crazy. Of course, you still have your SATA connections. You've got an easy release mechanism to release your video card without having to reach down with something to, to get the latching mechanism. We've all been there, done that. Now they've eased that. All of these M.2s, I believe, all install, including the heatsinks, without a screwdriver. No tools required. They talk a little bit about the memory overclocking shield. So again, when we talk about gaming, we talk about power delivery, the big heat sinks on the voltage regulator modules, all that stuff when running at stock speeds would never need this sort of overkill. But it's there if you want it, and it's better to have more than you need rather than what you need not being enough that you have to push it harder than it was engineered to run, because that will reduce the lifespan of your product, and that will also reduce the likelihood of crashing. Reliability goes down the tubes as you try and find a balance. If you run it the way it's intended to run, you'll have a machine that should be 100% problem-free throughout its ownership with regards to reliability and with regards to performance. It'll just, when you have a machine that's overclocked, you might say it runs faster, but if that machine is crashing and the machine, say you got two machines, one you overclocked and one you didn't. The one you didn't overclock never crashes, but the one you did overclock crashes once in a while. Which one's faster? I got news for you. The one that doesn't crash is faster, because the whole reboot and reset and any lost work defeats the whole point of going any faster. Just means you could potentially lose more and more often. I don't know why people do this. I guess it's fun, but maybe that's the game they're playing. I don't know. You can certainly do that with this board, and it is designed for that type of playing. I use them as tools. I use them as a content creator to create content. And this is way overkill for what I need. I mean, this 20 plus 1 plus 2 plus 1 plus 1 power phase design is over the top. All of these things highlighted in purple are your voltage regulator modules with giant heat sinks on them, so they can be overclocked. When they're running stock, they don't need all that. But again, you might have an 8-cylinder engine and you may never race your car and you may never tow anything, and you probably could get by with a 4-cylinder engine, but you like having the extra power just in case you need it. It's kind of like that. There are a total of 6 M.2 sockets. Look at here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 M.2s. These are all Gen 4s, every single one of them underneath this giant heatsink. The downside of having the giant heatsink and all these M.2 slots is we only have 2 physical slots on a full-size ATX board. So if you're filling the top one with a GPU, that just leaves you 1 slot left over, very similar to a micro ATX board. But that's because of all the space and the lanes of traffic that these M.2 drives take up. I personally wouldn't add that many drives to a machine. We're definitely going to use this Gen 5 slot here in the middle. I probably won't even touch these other 5, but they're there if you want them. This also, specializes in memory overclocking. So not only CPU overclocking, but memory overclocking. I don't recommend overclocking unless you've got a lot more time and money on your hands than I do. But quite frankly, that's all it's about. I just don't have time to play like that. And I can't tolerate, my business cannot tolerate a customer who's calling me because their system crashed because I gave them, 12% more power, but now they just lost all their work. So that's just going to make me lose a customer is what that's going to do. They talk a little bit about that easy release for the graphics card and hear about the M.2 easy release toolless design. And then the bottom heatsink here, which we'll take a look at as we take a look at this board for the very first time. I've never removed the board from the box, and everything you see is live and unscripted. Anytime your motherboard comes with a heatsink for your M.2 drive, you should be using the heatsink that came with the motherboard. If your motherboard did not come with an M.2 heatsink, then put a heatsink on your M.2 drive if you need one. If you don't need one, don't add one, because it affects the overall look of the board, and you're spending money you don't need to spend for something that will give you no benefit. So for example, most Generation 3 NVMe drives, heatsinks are just there for looks. Most of them. You might be an exception, but I see a lot of people spending money they don't need to spend to do things they don't need to do that has no impact of performance or reliability. It's all just, it's like a fad. If you want to spend your money unnecessarily for items that will give you no benefit and actually take away from the look of your board, don't let me get in your way. But clearly, if I were running my business that way and customers found out they were buying things and paying for things they didn't need that it had no benefit, I probably wouldn't have those customers very long. When we look at the cooling, they talk a little bit about all the fan headers. Look here, we've got every pink number here. 1, 2. Is that a fan header? 1 and then 1, 2. Why isn't that 3? These must mean something. Oh, I see. 1 and 1 are the CPU fan connectors. 2 is an all-in-one pump fan header. And then you've got 3, 3, 3, and 4. So 3, 3, 3, those are going to be your chassis fans that you can plug into. And number 4 would be another water pump fan. Well, this would be the fan on the water pump. Not all water pumps have fans on them. So I see what they did there. And then you've got this one over here. There's another fan header. I don't like this location because it's hard to hide the wire, but it's very, very close to your rear case fan, which makes it very tempting to use. I personally prefer the look because everything's got, you know, every computer case now has glass panels and customers can see it. I would prefer to run the fan, the rear case fan out the back behind the board and then bring it back over and plug it in somewhere up here. Sometimes some boards have fan headers along the side. This one is just too visible. There's no way to hide the cable and it just looks terrible, but it's really convenient. They talk a little bit about all the heat sinks, etc. We're going to continue on. The killer networking. This thing has a 5 gig network interface card on it and a 2.5 gig. Now, since our 10 gig network really can't transfer anything at 10 gig because we don't have a NAS fast enough. Our fastest NASs will only transfer at about 8 gig. That's the best they can do because of the speed of the storage that's in them. I think we'd need a much more expensive NAS with a lot more drives, maybe 7 or 8 drives to achieve the full 10 gigs. But when you go at a fraction of this price for a 10 gig interface card, you get a 5 gig one and you're getting 80% of the speed for about 50% of the price. And the difference is seconds, milliseconds maybe, depends on what you're transferring and how often. We also have Thunderbolt 4 on this board. This thing is loaded. There's a little bit of information on the 5 gig LAN, and of course it has a 2.5 gig LAN as well. And it talks about the ports. We've got the Lightning gaming ports, which, again, it's designed for gamers. It's supposed to lower your keyboard jitter and latencies. I don't know. That doesn't matter to me. You can just use them as regular USB ports. On top of that, you've got their dynamic audio that's built in, and what they call polychrome RGB. That's a little RGB at the bottom of the board and over the I/O shroud. And it looks like on, those are just fans. Okay, so we scroll down. I was hoping to see a little bit more about the USB ports in the back. We'll take a look at that. It's got a lot of USB ports in the back. There is an optional M.2 expansion card that allows for 4 more M.2 drives. But you have to understand, this is a by-4 connector here, right? So if each drive that you plug in here is running ×1, then you get the equivalent of 1 big drive that runs at ×4, almost like a RAID controller, I suppose. And you're not going to get the ×4 speed from each one of these. So paying extra money for a Gen 4, where the only benefit of Gen 4 is speed, and then running it at ×1 doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I suppose it may run double the speed of a Gen 3 ×1. I'd have to test it. But that would give you a total of 10 NVMe drives. Now look, if you've got 10 NVMe drives, buy a NAS. That's crazy. It talks a little bit about the auto driver installer, which we'll see once we get Windows 11 installed. There's our ports on the back. Look at all of the USB. We got 4 here, 2 more here, 2 more here, 2 more here, and 2 more here. So we've got USB, what looks like 3.1, 3.2, and Thunderbolt 4, USB 4, and Wi-Fi 7. And I think this is this 5.1 or 7.1 audio output? 7.1. So the 0.1 is a subwoofer, so 7 channel. So that'll include basically 3 pairs of left and right with a center channel and a subwoofer, all coming out of that one port. Woo! That is, you know, an audiophile's dream right there, to have all of that all built in. You don't have to add anything. This board is ready to rock and roll as it is equipped. And if we look over at Amazon, we'll see the price on that. A little pricey at $350, but you're getting an awful lot of motherboard for $350. Keep in mind, ASRock makes a board they call the Tai Chi. That's their high-end line, and you're looking around $600. You're getting damn near a Tai Chi board for almost half the price. Take a look at our CPU. $400 is what the Ultra 7 brand new CPU from Intel is priced at currently. When we bought it, it was $409. It's gone down $10. They're easily available and in stock, and we've never used one until today, so I'm looking forward to seeing how that works. The RAM is the OLOy DDR5. This is 2 sticks that are 24 gigs each. That's going to give us a total of 48 gigs of RAM. I don't care much about the RAM speed. Again, I'm not overclocking it. If I have a little overhead, nothing wrong with that, as long as the price is right. Finally, we're taking a look at this crucial T700. Don't confuse this with the T705. The T700 will read speeds up to 12,400. The T705 is $100 more, or I take it back, it's probably like $60 or $70 more. And it'll read speeds 2,000 megabytes faster. That's it. Otherwise, they're the exact same drive. So we're going to use that as our main storage drive because 12,400 is ridiculous. Anything higher than that is even more ridiculous. Anything above Gen 4 is pretty ridiculous. So, there's a 4 terabyte version of it too. If you want to drop $400 on it, that's not too bad. The 4 terabyte version of the T705 is $525, $125 more, and it only moves the data 1,600 megabytes per second faster. So a little bit of loss for your money there. It just depends if you got to have the best and you've got the budget to afford it. Do know that these options are available to fit whatever your particular wants, needs, and desires are. I try to focus on best bang for the buck. And as I mentioned, probably the only component that we're dealing with that is not a best bang for the buck is this Gen 5 drive, because it's so class leading in its performance. There's only one level above it, and it's made by, sorry, that's the CPU. It's made by the same company. A Gen 4 drive, you probably couldn't tell a difference. Outside of benchmarks, your system's not going to boot any faster. I don't really think you're going to notice your games loading any faster. Maybe you might. I guess it depends on your sensitivity and patience and tolerance in the game you're playing. To each their own. It's for you to decide. I'm just here to provide the information to my clients that run businesses. They don't notice any difference above a SATA 3. They don't see it at all. I've experimented. Not a single one of my business clients. But by the way, that's my bread and butter. That's what's kept me in business for 30 years. These are the people that are most important to me. For that reason, I want to keep them happy. I don't want to charge them for things they don't need. And I have experimented and swapped out drives for faster drives and let them live with them for a while and then get their opinion, and didn't tell them I did it. I did it, and then I waited to see if they'd call me. If they didn't call me, I'd call them and I'd say, have you noticed your computer's running a little differently? And then they never, ever, maybe it's a little slower. No, it's not slower, but faster drive. Anyway, it's all a big waste of money for business in most cases. There are some specialty employees that do different things that other employees don't do. Those employees individually may benefit from higher end hardware that's less value oriented if they're doing some really high end rendering or processing work. But out of all the companies I work with, I have only had one company that had one employee that had that requirement. Now, I'm going to move this flash drive aside and let's get this opened up and see what we got in the box here. And I want to switch back over to my chat room here just so I can keep an eye on what you guys are saying. Hey, $10 comes in from Paul Gray in Australia. Thank you, Paul. And it looks like I got to resize a window here. There we go. Gregory Howard joins us and says hello. Welcome in, Gregory. Good to see you, my friend. And Shamim Kajviraz says hello. Planet Cryos with a $2 super chat said, this is my opinion. You're right, Kerry. A lot of people will disagree with both of us. Pick sides. Let's see. Honestly, let me just clarify one thing right out of the gate. If you are paying me to provide you with service, your opinion is very important to me, because without the business, I have to go get a job somewhere else. When my customers have requests, when my customers have express a value in something, It's my job to provide them what it is they're asking for. And if I fail to do that, I would be a fool to think that I'm going to stay in business. You've got to listen to the customer, provide the customer what is important to the customer. If I have some concerns, I voice them to the customer. Make sure the customer understands that that's still the right decision, that they don't want to make any changes, and then I provide it to the customer. And it doesn't matter if I agree with it. It doesn't matter if any of you agree with any of it. What matters is that customer is satisfied with the transaction and the service and the product that I have provided them, that they will hopefully refer me, recommend me, and will order again from me. That's the reality of it. And so when people say they agree or they don't agree, honestly, where that really matters is if there's a financial transaction in business. So what I want you to do, because I'm not financially motivated through any of this, nobody's, except for the members, of course, and super chats and gift cards, they're very non-specific, right? Somebody doesn't necessarily say, I'm giving you this in exchange for something specific, other than hopefully they just want to support the channel and more content that they enjoy. But if somebody were to say, I'm going to give you this and in exchange you're going to give me that, right? If I fail to provide what that customer is expecting, I'm not going to have a happy customer. And an unhappy customer will leave reviews. A happy customer, not so much. And having happy customers, if you want to stay in business a long time, it's critical to get a repeat customer versus trying to acquire a new one over and over. Customer acquisition costs are way too high for something that offers such a small profit in this line of work. So you want to make sure as soon as you grab a customer, you can turn them into a repeat customer by giving them no reason to go somewhere else. They still might, but not because of anything you did. It's just a secret to running a business, any business. But thank you, Planet Crafts. I appreciate you. Let's see. So I saw that one already. Let's take a look at this board. It's feels like you're getting money for the pound here. It's pretty heavy. Again, I want to emphasize the high-end line from ASRock is called Tai Chi. Very expensive board. And I'll be hard-pressed to know why anybody would buy it, because quite frankly, this is so close to it, I'm not even exactly sure what's different. But maybe if you're into extreme overclocking and you want to drop $600 on a motherboard, I mean, I don't have any clients that would tolerate that if I did that to them. In the box, and you can see, I never opened this before. It just arrived. We've got a small box here, which looks like it's probably accessories. This is the Wi-Fi antenna, so we'll set that over there. You'll see, unlike MSI, we've got no foam, we've got no zip ties, we have less waste. And then we've got a big solid box right here that's there for protection. I don't believe there's anything inside of this. I think it's just cushion. Wow, that is a heavy motherboard. All right, let's set that down. Yeah, that's confusing to me because it looks like there's something inside of this, but it's just cushion. That's a genius design. Then we're not adding more foam. We're not adding more materials to go into the landfill. At the bottom of the box, you'll see there's yet more cardboard. Cardboard's okay though. We've got some SATA cables. We have, oh, okay. The optional M.2 expansion card is included. So yeah, you can have 10 M.2 drives. So there you go. I know there's some of you. There's some of you that really think that's appealing. That sounds like a nightmare to me. Hey, how could I make this unnecessarily complex and more expensive? For what that's going to cost you, just buy a NAS. Because by putting all your data in one box, you're just, you're lighting a firecracker in your fingers. It's just a matter of time. You might be getting away with it for now, but it's just a crypto ransomware, accidental deletion, drive failure, theft, hurricane, fire. It's just this far away from you losing everything. So get that data out of the box, get it out somewhere else, or if you don't care about your data, knock yourself out. Finally, we have this last box, last little opening here. This contains something. I don't know what this is. This looks like something to do with ARGB. All right, maybe that's the, what did they call this? Something about the, they had an RGB thing. Polychrome sync. Maybe that has to do with polychrome. I don't know. I might care more about that if this becomes more of a showpiece. This looks like a little temperature thing, like a little temperature, a little thermometer kind of thing you could put. I don't know. I didn't even know they still did that. Here's a little M.2 screw in a plastic bag, just one little screw. This looks like another temperature sensor. Again, I don't install those. There's a standoff for what appears to be I guess that M.2 screw. Here's another temperature sensor thing. This fascination with temperatures. We have a case badge, a PG. I guess that means pretty good. Phantom Gaming. And then we have some documentation. You'll notice there's no DVD. Any drivers you're going to get automatically, as it showed in the website. And then this is the box we just removed everything from. And what I want to do is just leave the main box empty, because we're not worried about this stuff rolling around inside the box. Nothing here is fragile. So even if I were shipping this, it still goes in there willy-nilly. There's nothing to be broken. It doesn't need to be protected. Now, the motherboard itself, you'll also notice they don't put any tape on this anti-static bag. Well, thank goodness. Why was there tape on many different motherboard manufacturers' bags? Are they afraid the motherboard's going to get out and run away? So I'm happy to see common sense. When I take the board out, I want to grab it either by the edges or the heat sink and the back plate. Try to avoid touching any of the components on the board. But heat shields and things like that, you're okay with touching those. So here you'll see the giant heat shield, and I'm grabbing it. When I grab it, pay attention to how I hold my parts, even my top hand. I'm on the heat sink, and what you can't see on the back is this big metal plate. And this metal plate keeps the back of the board from ever touching the back of your case. Not that that's really ever been an issue, but it certainly maintains a safe distance, even if it is overkill. There is some plastic on here that you are intended to remove, because this is also supposed to help with cooling by letting air get back there, whether or not your case is well ventilated in that regard. Some are, some aren't. We have a ton of plastic covering every single lever and heatsink on here. So our quick release lever for our graphics card, that's got a little pull tab on it, and I appreciate that they've given us the pull tab so that it draws our eye to it. Sometimes people leave the plastic on because they didn't realize the plastic was there. So anytime there's a little pull tab, which you can see very carefully if you look, we have a little pull tab right down underneath my finger right there. There's another one right there. And you just grab that little pull tab and pull that stuff off. This will trap heat. It will yellow and wrinkle and make your motherboard look terrible through your glass case. And even that piece of plastic wasn't the whole size of this heatsink. It just was that bottom half. And oh, we have another pull tab in the middle. Another funky shape. And what, is there one more? No? This part said you don't need any protection, but all your neighbors and brothers do. Okay. Don't be jealous. Now, the rest of the board, I think, did I get all of the pull tabs off? Sometimes the back of the I/O shield. We'll see as we build it if we find any more. But it really helps make it shine when it's in your case. And when you're looking for that aesthetic, boy, if you leave that plastic on, it just makes it. My grandparents used to have plastic on a brand new couch. The couch looked terrible. And it was uncomfortable and cold and loud. Thank goodness people don't really do that anymore. Don't leave the plastic on is what I'm saying. It's not good for you. But it's not good for the device. This giant heatsink, there's 5 M.2s underneath here. You see this nub, this little round button? Slide that away. Let me set this down. I've never done this before on this board, but you slide this away. And it's completely toolless. You see you've got all the thermal tape for your M.2 drives there. And then you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 M.2s there. You'll slap your drives in there with the quick connects, no screws are required. And then when you set this back in, you simply align it. Which way did it go? I guess it went this way, right? You align it on one side and then push straight down and you should hear it click. Drive's installed. Yeah, that's all there is to it. This one up here, this is a thicker, fatter heatsink for hotter drives, specifically for Gen 5. You don't have to put a Gen 5 in here. You could put Gen 4 or Gen 3 in here, but you're wasting a fast slot if you do that. It also has the little quick release button, just lifts out. Tape is there, tape is also on the bottom. You're gonna insert it on one side where it locks in, and then just push the other side down until it locks. And as I lifted that, I saw another piece of plastic that has to come off right there. Did you see it? Once again, this not only affects the looks of it, but also allows for the heat to dissipate much easier without the plastic in the way. So one more time, we're going to slide that in. You're going to find there's some teeth on the bottom, and they're going to hook into something metal here. And if I move it around, I'll slide it. It kind of just slides right in. And then just push straight down. You hear it lock into place. It ain't going nowhere. That is genius. I love that. There's all those ports we were talking about earlier. This thing is loaded with ports. And we've got all these fan headers down here, as we discussed. We've got a diagnostic LED up here, which I never use and never believe, and I think these are the biggest placebo in the computer industry. It's fun to watch the little LED numbers flip around, but what they mean, who cares? They're pretty much meaningless in my experience. Once in a while, they might help you solve a problem, but most of the times they lead you down a rabbit hole. You're much better off using this than using this to figure out what's wrong. And just above that, you'll see we've got a power button and a reset button soldered right to the board. You will see that on more expensive motherboards. That means I don't have to grab my external power switch if I don't want to when I'm testing this outside of the case. So that's really for people that like to, for overclockers and people that like to tinker. This is not a feature I'm going to be using any more than if the machine is in for a diagnostic, or if we're setting it up for the very first time. The button might get pressed 3 or 4 times. Maybe as much as a dozen times at the most in its entire life. Because once this is put into a case, there's no reason for us to be inside here hitting these buttons unless you're a tinkerer. And if you're a tinkerer, this should keep you very happy for a while. Okay. Let's see. Oh, my YouTube crashed. Well, I'm glad to see that they're not working on that, solving that problem. Let's see. Phil Stott said that GPU release feature is a nice feature. Absolutely, I agree, because it used to be you'd had to release a little latch right down in here. And again, pay attention to how I'm holding this motherboard. Look at where my fingers are holding. Stay away from touching any of the components, and you don't have to worry about wearing an anti-static wrist strap if you hold the parts the way I show you. Now, when I go back to my OBS screen here so I can see what I'm showing you, this is what we're talking about. This right here is all the way at the end of your graphics card, and you slide that to release your graphics card. I mean, why didn't they do that to begin with? Instead of trying to dig around and get between the top of the graphics card and the bottom of your heatsink, or, in this case, we'd have to get by the M.2 drive, the Gen 5 drive, to reach a mechanism release that's typically right there. Very, very difficult. Again, most of you probably experienced it. Now, instead, you can reach underneath your graphics card. If I find the right side of the motherboard here, I just slide that slot. Much, much easier. No tools required. And even if you had fat fingers, you can still get under there. So I like that that's toolless, as well as the M.2 installation being toolless. I'm not sure what the tiny screw is for, and I've not looked at the manual, nor do I intend to. I just want to build it, and I'm excited about it. We're one stage lower than the T705, and we're one stage lower than the Ultra 9. That 2 parts going one stage lower saves us over $300. So that's why I say this really could be considered a budget build, except this is a $350 motherboard, and let's say a $400 CPU. We're at $700 without a case, power supply, SSD, or RAM. But you can buy a really nice board for under $200. So let's take $150 off of that. Say you didn't get this really nice board with 10 M.2 drives. You probably don't need that. You probably don't need to spend that extra $150. So you can pick up a really decent, even the live mixer board, the Z890 live mixer, I think it's $200. With a $400 CPU, you're at $600. With a 2 terabyte Phasing Gen 4, you're another $100, so $700. RAM, you could probably pick up 32 gigs of RAM for about $100. You're at $800. And then you just need your case, power supply, and cooler. So you're likely at about $1,000 price point for what is, in my opinion, a killer machine. I mean, when I say best bang for the buck, I'm talking higher end. If you wanted to save even more, you could get the Ultra 5 processor, right? Go with a 1 terabyte drive with 32 gigs of DDR5, along with your case, power supply, and cooler. I bet you could get this down under 900, and then depending on if you have sales tax. The fact that we're able to put this together and have it as powerful as it is, I'd say if I had any doubts about anything, the motherboard being $350 is not a budget board, but for what you're getting, compare it to the $600 Tai Chi board, suddenly this $350 board is a bargain. If you need all that I/O, all those USB ports, Thunderbolt 4, 10 M.2, up to 10 M.2s, you really are getting more because you're paying for more. And you can feel it when you pick it up. I haven't turned this board on and I already like it. The color combination, the box is purple, but the motherboard itself is black. So I'm not sure if this lights up purple or if this looks like purple. So depending on how it lights up, I'm guessing it's going to look good in a black case either way, because purple and black look good. You might be able to change, I'm sure you can change the colors, but the default is likely purple the way they advertise it. And if that's the case, black and purple are going to look fantastic. That's why I want to see what it looks like before I pick the case. It's nice to have that ability, right? That there's not a customer waiting for it, so we can kind of take our time. As I mentioned, the issue with the case on yesterday's video, when we did that 9900X build, trying to put that into the B-Gears Black Widow case was just stupid. I bought a Leon Lee 011. Everybody's ranting and raving about that case, and I looked at it, and the compact version is very attractive. Along with the Hydro Shift cooler, that should make Lou Greenia happy. And we got 3 reverse case fans, so we can add some RGB to the bottom. It's not for the fans, it's for the look. And then 2 more of those same fan designs from Leon Lee to go to the back of the case. So we have, are you sitting down? Because of a $75 case that would have completed our build, we spent $550 on a new case. So the Leon Lee 011 or 011 was $200? I forget. The Hydro Shift cooler was $260. The reverse blade fans, the 3 of them, are sold in a kit for $110. And then the 2 fans that go on back, I just bought another 3 fan kit, but they just weren't reverse blade fans. And I think those were $99. And I found Amazon had them returned. Somebody bought them and returned them for both the rear fans and the bottom fans, the reverse blade fans. And that was about $50 off in total. But when it's done, it changes the complete. It's trying to build something cheap, to make it fast and cheap. And then I realized everything was so nice, what a shame to cover it up. It deserves, nice components deserve a nice case. And a lot of these cases are honestly getting very boring for me. It's like, oh, it's another one like that, it's another one like that. Or it's a really interesting case, but it doesn't give us all the USB ports up front. There's one called Asia Power, Asia something. And it's a big case with a bubble front on it. $175, and they don't even give me full USB ports on the front. They give me one Type A and one Type C, and that's it. Hey, for $175, and the case is massive. That's the other thing I don't like, is how big these cases are getting. That's why I went with the compact version of the 011. And so that is the follow-up of what we decided doing our research last night, looking at what budget we had. That's not what we were intending to do with the budget. But if you're not going to do it right, why do it at all? And we haven't looked at any Leon Lee products in a long time. And because our budget was spent on yesterday's project to finish it, I don't have any case or power supply lined up or the budget for it yet for this. But this will happen in a part 2 regardless, so we have time to figure out, what we want to do. And we're always open to your suggestions as well in that regard. So we're going to have to buy a cooler, we're going to have to buy a power supply, and we're going to have to buy a case. Or we use something we have over here in inventory in Studio C. I have an NZXT H510. I have a Be Quiet Pure Bass 800. They're kind of bland. I really could use something a little flashier, but at the same time, something new, something different. Thermaltake used to have really bizarre looking cases like the helicopter. And Inwin had some really bizarre looking cases. Now everybody's dialed it back and become more conservative for some reason. I might just need to be more patient, or I might just suck it up and use the same case I've always used, which is the H7. I always like the NZXT H7. You can't go wrong with it. It's just boring to me. It's so good, it's boring. All right. Before we get started opening up boxes, let me just check the chat room here. John Paul Bacon mentions X3D V-Cache memory on the 9000 series have been reworked. They can be overclocked about the same as non-X3D. So on Tom's hardware, there are a couple of X3D 9000 series chip owners that have burn marks all over their chips and their systems won't boot anymore. The debate is, did the user install the chip incorrectly into the socket that caused arcing? Or is there a problem with the chip? So Gamers Nexus will be doing a video on this this week. We should see a video regarding, is this a thing or is this user error? But with 2 people now with X3Ds that have burned up just like the Intel did, it's definitely clickbait. I mean, I'll tell you that. It's not massive with only 2 people complaining, but most people who want the chip can't even get it. So with fewer chips, you're going to have fewer problems. But we'll just keep an eye on that. Don't assume what you're reading is true. Gamers Nexus is unbiased. I have no doubt whatever they conclude is probably going to be accurate, and I'll reserve my judgment to see that content. I don't overclock. I'm sure if you get any chip, it runs fine. It's the moment you start overclocking it, if you're going to have a problem that damages the chip, at the very least, it's going to degrade the life of the chip. But regardless, that's where you're going to find the problem and create the problem. Paul Gray with a $10 Australian Super Chat. Joining us from Australia. Thank you, Paul. Good to see you, my friend. Mortant renews membership, now a member for 30 months, and says hello, Carrie and Mara and everyone in the chat. Welcome in, Mortant. Thank you for your membership renewal. 30 months. Thank you for sticking around. And Paul Gray also contributed another $10 Australia earlier. And again, another thank you to our friend Paul Gray down under. The wonder from down under. Now, let's take a look at putting this together, right? Let's see how this goes. I want to start with the CPU. We haven't done an Ultra 7, right? This is our first one. Hey, Mara. She's listening with headphones with the delay. Did we do an Ultra 7 before?
Did we do an Ultra 7? No.
This is our first one, right?
This is our first one.
But we have an Ultra 9 on the ASUS build coming up.
We do.
And another Ultra 7 on the live mixer build coming up.
Coming up.
That's why I'm confused.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to think, well, what did we do before that?
This is the first time we're using that CPU.
I thought it was.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
And that board is awesome. I'm drooling.
Yeah, you like it?
I like it a lot.
Does that look purple to you? I don't think it's purple.
I love, that board is gorgeous. Yes.
Gorgeous.
Most of it's black, but with the purple and a little bit of blue that's on there, it's
Yeah.
a beautiful color scheme.
Yeah, it's like, oh, was there plastic back here? Oh, that's the foil. Yeah, it's like purple through here. I don't know how well the camera's picking
It's kind of
that.
iridescent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In a blue way and in a purple.
Yeah, I love
So
it.
if you look at it and we tilt it, you'll see like, ooh, the way the camera's picking that up. You'll see how it varies from here and how it's a different color,
Yeah.
like a different shade up
I
here.
love it. Even the box is gorgeous. Yeah.
Well, let's just throw out all the parts and keep the box. Cut a hole in it and make
we
it
should change all the colors in here to make them purples and blacks and blues. All right, never mind.
You do that. If you do that, I'll make you purple, black, and blue. For $400, you don't get much. We get a cardboard box. We get some documentation that'll go in the box. And the CPU that is not fragile at all, but has all this cushion for shipping. This isn't going to look any different than the previous generation. It now has 1,851 pins instead of 1,700 pins. But to the naked eye, you probably can't really count them. This chip measures horizontally and vertically the same as the previous generation, but the height of the internal heat shield there is a bit taller. So for that reason, we don't use a contact frame, nor do I think any contact frames are made, and they would be a waste of money for this. But that's our first look. It looks exactly the same. Also, the notches that help align the CPU into the socket, every Intel CPU has these little notches. Many people don't even notice them, but they can help guide you into the socket. And you'll see right where this finger is, there's a notch right up there. Is there one on the other side? No? And then there's usually the same notch on the opposite end, which is likely, it's right there. Right there. Whoop. Right there's the notch. You notice how I hold the chip? You see, I'm not touching the top because I'm going to put thermal compound there, and I don't want anything from my fingers, from oils from my skin to dirt from things I've been touching, rubbing off onto the heat shield. That could impair the efficiency, the efficacy of the thermal paste that we put on later. If I do touch it, it's not a big deal. I can wipe it down with some rubbing alcohol, or don't. It probably doesn't make that big of a difference. And on the back side, you definitely don't want to be touching any of those little landings there. So by holding it by its edges, we don't have to worry about an anti-static strap. We don't have to worry about any electrostatic discharge. There's nowhere for it to go. And we don't have to worry about, getting the top of the heatsink dirty from my dirty fingers. This internal loading mechanism, it's called an ILM, and I'm going to keep repeating that until I remember it, because I've always called it a retention lever. And AMD probably calls theirs something else. It's probably an Intel term. This works no differently than any other CPU loading of previous generation, and even AMD, pretty much they're the same. And you will see right on the frame itself, it tells you, well actually no, it tells you on the plastic cover, this is a RL ILM, meaning a reduced load ILM. So if you're somebody who's going to be overclocking and overvolting, and you're worried about CPU warpage, just make sure the motherboard you buy comes with the RL version of the ILM, okay? You can sell it, motherboard makers can sell their boards with either, There are two different internal loading mechanisms, the regular one and the reduced load one. This board's a bit more expensive, so they didn't hold back on being cheap with that. They gave you the more expensive reduced load ILM. Let's go ahead and open this up. Once again, this is going to be very similar to any other recent Intel chip we've installed. To the naked eye, it looks exactly the same as a Socket 1700, but it isn't, okay? We still have the golden triangle, down in the corner like we've always had. The text still goes flowing in the same direction as the board. Since the board, when it's upright in a tower case, this is going to be the top, this is the bottom. So with the text at the top reading downwards, that is always the orientation unless you're on a mini ITX system. And what I do to seat this is I'm just going to find a corner and gently lower it. And now I'm hitting the pads of my fingers before the chip can fully seat. So I'm going to let one finger away and then the other finger and let it fall gently, as close as I can get it. Let it fall. And I'll grab just the edge here and give it a slight, very light wiggle. Do not push down on it. Right now that chip is hovering over those delicate pins underneath. And the last thing you want to do is touch them or, accidentally put pressure down on them. That's what this loading mechanism does. It pushes that CPU down and make contact with those 1851 pins below it. Now, we were running a time where these little covers that protect those pins, that they would pop off on their own and then they didn't pop off on their own. I sure do like it when they pop off on their own. So let's find out if it'll do that by itself. We cover the lever, bring the bracket down, I don't know. And then we're going to bring down this lever. Oh, and it popped up on its own. This is there to protect those pins from damage in shipping. Forget your foam and your zip ties and your anti-static bags. This is absolutely critical. If you ever take that CPU out and you have to ship this motherboard without a CPU in it, like for an RMA, you absolutely must put this over those pins or your warranty is null and void. The manufacturer receives it with those pins exposed. They send it right back to you and say, sorry, Charlie. With that being said, we're going to keep this in the motherboard box. We very rarely ever have to send a board back to a manufacturer. But the minute I throw that away, I'll need it. So, yeah, Murphy's Law, man. With regards to putting the M.2 drive in, I've demonstrated this before. It's incredibly easy. I love this so much. You have no idea. When I'm struggling with a case like yesterday and I'm complaining and people go, what's the big deal? You've got to deal with dozens and dozens of computers day after day or week after week, month after month before you finally get enough, all right? When it's a novelty for you, it can be enjoyable no matter how ridiculously difficult and time-consuming it is. But when you're earning a living with a customer sitting there looking at their watch and other customers behind them waiting on their turn, you start to feel the pressure, right? And you don't get paid until you get it done. So if I'm not getting paid, guess whose fault that is? It's my fault. I got to be more careful with the parts that I select. And I've got all these other projects lined up waiting behind one project. And if that one project is far more difficult than it's worth, if I've got a $10,000 build, then I'm willing to put in a lot more labor. If I've got a $1,200 build, and it's going to take 3 times more time to put that together than another $1,200 build, just with different parts, which one's more profitable for me? Which one's going to give me a happier customer? Which one's going to be harder to work on and take more time? So it's not just about what I'm doing today, it's how this is going to affect me in the future. That's why I have a little tolerance for it, when there's so many better choices I could be making. But in order for me to discover new parts and new manufacturers, it's a risk I take. And we will use those parts. Don't get me wrong, that Black Widow case will get used. But I'm telling you right now, the components I have in inventory right now, they're all too fancy for that case. I need a basic motherboard like an i5 with a stock fan that's, not expensive. Maybe a 10th or 11th, not even that. Maybe a 9th or a 10th gen motherboard with a stock cooling fan that's an i5, that will go nicely in the Black Widow case. Those would be parts equivalent in value to what the case is, instead of trying to put something fancy and new into a older designed cheap case, you know, that just makes life difficult with cable management, with all of the added RGB and liquid cooling. And the case can do it, it's just not. There are better choices, and those better choices only cost a few dollars more. So anyway, you'll see. It's going to look very different, and I think you'll agree. Maybe not $500 worth different, but it's a completely different build. By changing the case and the cooler to something entirely different, we end up with a build that is very different from what I was initially starting to do and what it was going to look like. Essentially, it was going to look like a cheap gaming PC, and now it's going to look like a much nicer machine, which still could be a gaming PC. Now, to put our Generation 5 M.2 NVMe in, it is so easy. All NVMe drives install the same, except sometimes you need screws, sometimes you need heat sinks, and sometimes you need certain generations of slots if you want to get the best out of the drive. If this was a Gen 3 drive and I put it in the Gen 5 slot, it'll still run at Gen 3 speeds, but the Gen 5 slot is being wasted, right? That's why they give you USB 2 ports on the back here. Plugging your keyboard or your mouse into USB 3 isn't going to make it type any faster. You're just wasting a fast port. But if I take this Gen 5 drive and I plug it into one of the Gen 4 slots, well, then I'm only going to get Gen 4 speeds, and I didn't need to spend that much money. I could have bought a Gen 4 drive of the same capacity for $100 less. So we're going to put it in this one Gen 5 slot because of the bandwidth it requires. You only get one of them. As CPUs improve and they open up more I/O, that will change in the future, or you need to get something like Threadripper or something that has a lot more input-output lanes in the CPU. We're going to remove the protective tape that's on this thermal tape, and we're going to do so on the bottom as well. I like that they put it on the top and bottom here. We'll go ahead and take that off. If you forget to remove this tape, you could run into heat-related issues. So take your time, enjoy your build, and don't make those very basic mistakes. This drive is going to just slide into the slot, as we've demonstrated many times over the years. And then there's this little spinning plastic dial, and we need to turn it in a certain position where the drive seats all the way down past the ridges on the dial. Then you turn the dial, and those ridges sit on top of the drive, locking it in, so no screws are required. You're just spinning a little dial. And it's a difficult thing for me to show you from a distance, but there are plenty of other YouTube channels demonstrating boards from ASUS and other manufacturers, and they're all pretty much the same. And then I love that we can just snap our heatsink back on, and we don't have to deal with any screws there either. Just a matter of remembering which direction this went on, which I think was like this. Again, there's little teeth, little fork there. And that little fork is going to go, does it go this way? Or does it go the other way? Yeah, so it looks like the button, I wasn't paying attention. It looks like the button goes towards the I/O shield on this one. I'm just curious though, can it go on the other way? I don't think it can. No, it's not going to go on the other way. It would be nice if I had some other indicator, or if I was paying attention. And I'm also making sure the tape is lining up with the top of the M.2. You should be able to even do it blindfolded. You should be able to just sort of get the heatsink in the general vicinity and have it align. Something like that. You get that back end, those forks gonna slide right in there, and then you just push this down and it locks in. M.2 is installed. Now, I have covered that from every angle, so hopefully I have not left any what if question remaining. If I have left anything out, let me know, but I tried to cover every way of looking at that. And they call that their, it's either like easy release or quick release. Every manufacturer has their own name. I think ASUS calls it their key release. Anyway, RAM is easy enough to put in, but it might get in the way of putting our heatsink on. These chips don't come with heatsinks. These are the K versions of the chips. But the 12900, 13900, and 14900 non-K version is more expensive than the K version. A 14900 costs more than a 14900K. And the reason for that is it comes with this beautiful laminar cooler. This is from Intel. It's all metal. It's one of the best coolers I think Intel's ever made. And people are throwing these out. They're putting them up on eBay because they're buying liquid coolers, which is insane to me. There's no reason to be throwing this out or dismissing its quality. It's quiet and it's RGB, and it's at no additional cost with your cooler. It has this back plate that you have to attach to the back of the board, and it also has some double-sided sticky tape that'll hold the back plate in position while you're attaching this so it doesn't slide around. But because this is just a temporary cooler, I'm not going to remove the double-sided sticky tape. I'm not going to, stick it. I'm just going to hold it there with my hand, because once I know everything works on this and we're happy with it, I do intend to replace this cooler with a liquid cooler, because this is a K processor. K processors don't come with coolers. The non-K processors do come with coolers, and those coolers are designed to run with the processor they were included with. So that's why I think it's crazy that people don't think these are good enough, when the manufacturer would not be selling you a chip that was going to burn up intentionally just to create expensive warranty returns and pissed off customers. So the benefit is yours and mine when you can pick these coolers up on eBay for 30 bucks. And they're brand new. Look, even the thermal compound that was applied at the factory, it's never been touched. And you've seen me use these on a lot of like 13500s, because that's a much more attractive and larger, heavier cooler than what it comes with. You don't need to do it. It just looks mostly an aesthetic thing, to be honest. I'm just going to set this back here, and I'm going to hold it in place rather than use the sticky tape. The sticky tape would attach to the metal back here. But with one hand under it, I should be able to just go ahead and align this and put it on right quick. And, we definitely don't want to run this full out for a long period of time with this cooler. I mean, it might be adequate, but it's not my intention. I just want to make sure everything works and that I'm ready for the next phase, which will be putting it into a case. And I'll have to decide which cooler I want to use based on which case I get, what's going to look the best, what's going to perform the best, and what's going to be within our budget. And this cooler will definitely come off. That's all I know for sure. Once I get all of the screws here started, I can let go of that bracket that's sitting below, and the screws will hold it in place for me. We do need something to test with. Otherwise, if I build this whole thing and put it together into a case and it's not working right, it's not booting up, then I have to work within the confines of the case or take it back out. And to me, this is less effort. Now I'm just going to use my regular electric driver here to just tighten this down on each corner. If I was going to make this permanent, this is not how I would be doing it. Okay, we did opposite corners to ensure that we still have a nice flush mating of the bottom of the heatsink to the top of that CPU. We've got a fan power connector that needs to be hooked up, which looks like it's going to be, I know it told us when we looked at the website, but I just want to see here. That says CPU fan 2, and that says all-in-one pump. So it must be this one, the one closest to the CPU fan. And it says CPU fan right on it, and we'll plug that in. Now the ARGB, we do not have to plug this in. If you don't want ARGB, you would leave it unplugged, and you'd hit that button. That'll turn off the RGB. If you plug this in, then the button does nothing. There is an ARGB header right here, and just because it's so convenient, there are two side by side. I really like that. That can go right there. Now normally I would get some cable ties and clean that up because it's going to interfere a little bit with the RGB on our RAM. The OLOy RAM, I use it because it's a great deal. It's inexpensive, it looks attractive, and it works well. And with DDR5, you get different options of RAM capacity. These are 24 gigs each instead of 16 or 32. And these could be 48 gigs each. We can go that high. I would not put 4 of these in if you want to run XMP. If you want to run XMP, stick with 2 memory modules if you want the best likelihood of it working and working quickly. I always put the first RAM module in 1 slot away from the CPU. So the slot closest to the CPU we're not using. We go to the next one over. The RAM only goes in one way. Gently slide it into its track and make sure it's in there correctly, and that the cut in the circuit board matches the notch in the socket. And once it does, then with your thumbs push down pretty heavy on one side, then the other, and you should hear that click into place. We're going to skip another slot, taking us to the very final slot at the slot closest to you. You see why I started with this one, right? If I started with that one, you wouldn't be able to see me do this one. So that's just for your benefit. It doesn't matter which one you start with, but you can kind of block yourself in if you don't think, if you're not thinking ahead. Once again, same orientation, gently in the tracks. We've got a slot between them that we don't use and a slot after them that we don't use. And then we'll close the retention levers up on both sides there just to make it look pretty. And with that, we're ready to fire this bad boy up and install the new BIOS, assuming it's a new BIOS. And that's going to require a power supply. Because I don't know yet which power supply I'm going to use, we're just going to use the test bench power supply. We want to make sure everything works. Okay, that's my first concern. This is becoming less and less necessary. Everything always works. But if you're a first-time builder or you weren't really paying attention, likely the reason it doesn't work is because you made a mistake, not because you got a bad part. So just bear that in mind. If it's not working, the first thing you got to check is, what did I do? So we're going to pop our 24-pin connection on. And then we've got 2 CPU power connectors. We only need one of them unless we're overclocking. But if that's important to you, be sure you buy a power supply with 2 EPS power connectors. It will cost you more money, as anything overclocking or performance related will cost you more in electricity, cooling, and power, energy consumption. One of these will be labeled port 1, one will be labeled port 2. Sometimes it doesn't matter which one you use. I prefer to use the one labeled number 1 because if it does matter, that'll be the one to use first. Looking on the board, there's usually some writing on the circuit board next to them that identifies them. And I'm just looking for that right now. There is some very small writing underneath of them, and I need some higher magnification glasses to read that. You can always refer to your manual. Even the website showed a lot of close-up images. This is very, very tiny, and it's very dark. If you guess, and you guess wrong, the board may not boot. It won't hurt anything, but if you're wondering, why does my board not boot? Again, it's usually user error, but not always, but usually. So the one that's closest to the I/O shield here says it's port 1, and the one closest to the CPU says it's ATX number 2. So I'm going to plug into number 1, again, the one closest to the I/O shield. When you're dealing with really high-end CPUs like Threadripper, you will need to have every single power plugged in or it will not turn on. Ask me how I know. Whereas on these regular consumer-based CPUs, it's optional depending on if you're planning on overclocking or overvolting. With that done, we can get our keyboard and mouse. We'll set that out here. I will use one of the USB 2 ports since it's just a keyboard and a mouse. And I need a power cable which I have right here. Turn that on. And I finally, oh look at the RGB already started to light up. I finally just need an HDMI cable because I don't need the power button. I can use the surface mounted button that is also lit up, drawing your attention to it right there. Oh, and we have LEDs going on here. So even though the board is not powered on, it does have power. That's why you never work on a machine that's turned off unless it's also unplugged. There's still voltage in here. And you'll find out if you try and plug in a video card and you see a big electrical arc, even though the system was off. That's a great way to fry your motherboard and not have any warranty, and fry your $1,000 video card, and it was your fault. A lot of computer problems are user error. So take your time, double check, enjoy your build, and you'll likely succeed the very first time. And if you don't, as long as the power's off when you're making your mistakes, they should be fully recoverable as lessons learned, and you shouldn't repeat the same mistake. Let me grab my HDMI cable, which is right down here. There we go. And you'll also notice this board only has one HDMI output. If you want to add multiple monitors to this, you'd have to go through Thunderbolt to DisplayPort with adapters. And that would give you a total of 3. Or you'd have to add a graphics card. But, you know, people spending this kind of money probably would have the money to add a graphics card if they wanted to. I don't want to. I have no plans on adding GPUs because for video editing, I really cannot do better than the AMD chip is really good on gaming. The Intel chip is really good for AV1 video encoding. Okay, so that's our HDMI. I don't think I've ever used that T700, but it might have an OS on it. Look, we're going to find out right now. Let's jump over to our camera 2 input here, which is what I call this cable. Because this used to go to camera 2, so I still call it camera 2. Let's turn that on. You know what? I'll keep myself on screen just so it's not too confusing for folks that are new here. And I'm going to hit the power button. CPU fan is turning. Your very first boot up can take up to 90 seconds, sometimes even longer as it trains the RAM and the CPU. RGB is flowing on the RAM and on the cooler. Our diagnostic LEDs are moving. That's always a good thing. If they get stuck on a number, they might be frozen. Sometimes they might appear to be stuck and you're being impatient. Just leave it alone, give it time to register, and there it is. There's our power on self-test screen. I have no idea what version of BIOS we have on this, but we're about to find out. I suspect, because it's a brand new board, we're likely going to have an updated BIOS available. It does see 48 gigs of RAM, and if I get rid of camera 1 now, you can fully see the BIOS screen here in their basic mode. When I take a look at, the CPU fan is in the proper place because I can see the RPMs of the CPU fan. If I plug it into a different place, it might not boot or give me a CPU fan error. So that's why it's important, if you have a CPU fan, you plug it into the proper header. A2 and B2 are what we call the slots, or in this case, it'll be channel 1. Most people think A1 and A2 would be channel 1, or A1 and B1 would be channel 1, but that's not the way they do it. A2 and B2, if you're only using 2 RAM modules, that's your first channel, universally across motherboard makers. We're not going to enable anything with XMP unless we are completely done and satisfied after full testing, full installation, everything's put back together, everything's running great. It's been about a week that we've been using it, it's running wonderful, and now we want to try and turn on XMP to get a little bit more. And the reason we do that is if we then start experiencing crashing or odd behaviors, we know exactly why. If we turn XMP on now and we start experiencing any crashes or failures, well, what is it? What's causing it? Literally anything could be causing it. So to keep ourselves sane, we leave XMP off until we are satisfied for at least 1 week of actual usage that the computer is stable. If the computer becomes unstable after that, we know that turning XMP on was the only change we made, and to turn it back off or adjust it accordingly. Now, when I look at the BIOS, I'm looking for a BIOS version, and for some reason, I'm not getting the whole BIOS screen. Let me see if I can resize this. Interesting. It doesn't seem to. It doesn't seem to sync with my capture card correctly because you see it says like polychrome up here, but I can't see the rest of it. And I think our BIOS version's in there somewhere. I'm going to try just unplugging the HDMI cable and then plugging it back in again to see if it'll resynchronize with my capture card. And whatever signal it's sending out, my capture card is not rendering it properly. We're not getting the whole screen. As a result, I can't see. Oh, I guess right here it says Nova Wi-Fi 1.34. That's our BIOS version. ASRock and ASUS and Gigabyte place it in different places. Therefore, I'm just not looking in the right place. It's been in front of me the whole time, but it's still not right that we've got part of the screen cut off the right side and the bottom. Maybe a BIOS update fixes that. So, like, how do you even update the BIOS? I don't see the button for that because I think it's the instant flash is somewhere down below the screen, I think. But if I look and see what the latest BIOS version is, I can jump over here to my browser here on the streamer and type in ASRock Z890 Nova and press enter. And the first link takes me to ASRock's homepage. And I'm going to share this page with you here. Right there. Right, so this is where we were earlier, only this time we're going to look for support, which is not up here. If there's many motherboard manufacturers give you two support links. One is a generic support, and one is support for the specific product. I think this is the one I want right here. Yeah. And we're going to click on BIOS, and it's telling us 134 was the original BIOS. Then 202 came out, 208 came out, now 209 is out. And from what I can tell, nobody got 202 or 208 because I'm one of the first people to get this board. So this must be internal stuff, I don't know, or for product testers. I don't mind installing a beta BIOS because it's not that risky. For them to offer this as a beta to the general public means it's pretty solid. If they emailed it to you or gave you a private link, and they didn't make it public, they said, here, this is just for you. That means, hey, we don't know. But if it's publicly released as a beta, it's pretty solid. At the end of the day, it's up to you to decide if you want to go to 208 because you feel that's more likely going to be stable. Whatever you want to do. For me, the fact that it's offered to the public suggests to me it's good enough that they released it. If they were that uncertain about it, they would not have released it to the public. Now, I've got a flash drive here that I've already downloaded that 209 beta onto, and I'm going to plug it into any of the USB ports on the back of this machine. So when we go back over to this machine now, let me jump back over to camera 2. I have to figure out how the heck I am supposed to click on a button that I can't see. What happens if I hit refresh? Anything? Oh, I got to use a different mouse. Why is my mouse not working? My mouse does not work in the BIOS. Does my keyboard work? Yes, keyboard is working. So somewhere down here, there's a button, and I don't know where it is. There's advanced mode F6. Let's try F6. Do we get tools or anything? Yeah, right up at the top. Can I tab over to tools? Tool. Hit enter. Firmware recovery, no. What's this? That's RGB stuff. What's this? I can't read because it's not there. I wonder if there's a way for me to resynchronize my my capture card here. We choose device default. Let's see if that helps on the capture card. Oh, I think that did help. My mouse still doesn't work in the BIOS, but yeah, it helped a little bit. Boy, I sure wish I could see what was over there. Let me unplug the HDMI one more time. Oh, that's interesting. It's in a 4x3 mode for some reason. Let's give that a second and let it synchronize and see if that works. Otherwise, let's go back to our capture card. This is a capture card compatibility issue. Take it away from device default and put it back to 1920 by 1080. And I'm not getting anything at all now. Let me unplug one more time, plug it back in. Let me turn camera 2 off and back on again. Boy, I've really upset it. This is a visual problem. It's not an actual physical damage. It's not like a bad cable or anything like that. So if 1920 by 1080 isn't wide enough, I wonder if I can't double the resolution because the capture card will only be 1920 by 1080. So if this was outputting at 4K, it should automatically, well, it won't do anything with it at 4K, quite honestly. So I think what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to shut the machine back off. So we'll just tap the power button, let the machine power off. And let's just try turning it on one more time just to see if it initializes any differently. I don't think it will, but it doesn't cost anything to try. That'll give it an opportunity to resynchronize with the capture card, which apparently, see, that to me looks really big. But it gives it a chance to resynchronize with the capture card. If the capture card and this don't get along on the boot up, again, that may be resolved through a BIOS update. We have other ways around this, by the way. We can hook up an external monitor through USB-C, or I can even plug in a Type-C USB to DisplayPort adapter using another video output that might synchronize more reliably with the capture card. Or I could just buy a different capture card. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to solve this. Normally, you'd just be plugging it into a monitor and it would display just fine. This is because I'm a YouTube content creator using a capture card. You're not likely ever going to experience what I'm experiencing right now. I wouldn't worry yourself over it. When I turn off camera 1 here so I can see the whole screen, there is usually a button that we can click on for what they call instant flash. And sometimes there's a couple ways to get to that. One would be while you're in easy mode, the other would be if you're in advanced mode. And I think, and I'm not sure, but I think I have, let's go back here for a second. I think I have the Type-C to DisplayPort adapter cable. Didn't we just use it the other day? This is a Type-C to HDMI, so just for giggles and grins. Now sometimes, in order for this port to work, you've got to have Windows loaded driver for it. I don't know anymore. Like, every time they come out with these new boards and new chipsets, all the rules we know get changed. So it may vary depending on the motherboard, or maybe it won't work. I don't know. Unplug it in and see what happens. So this is going from a Type-C Thunderbolt to an HDMI port. And we may need to shut it off and turn it back on again and give it a chance to initialize that port. Once it recognizes something's plugged into it, it likely won't turn 2 or 3 monitors on at post time. It'll turn on whatever it considers priority 1 if there's multiple choices. So I've removed the HDMI, plugged it into just this port. Now look how much smaller the screen looks, much more refined. That's reassuring to me that we're going to get the whole BIOS screen this time. Again, it's just the capture card, it's the way they're talking, and it may be something this BIOS update fixes. I don't know. There's one way to find out for sure. But that fixed it. And if we go back over here now, we can see the bottom of the screen where the option for InstaFlash is, and my mouse is working. I hit Instant Flash. We got to make sure BitLocker is not turned on, which of course, this is a brand new motherboard with a brand new drive that has no format partition or data on it. It automatically finds the BIOS update I previously downloaded and placed on the flash drive, and we just tell it to go ahead and do that. And we're just going to sit here and wait for that to complete, no matter how long it takes. It shouldn't take too long, 5-6 minutes, but, you know, of course, just leave it alone, let it do its job. And you'll see up at the top where it says 1.34, that's going to change to 2.09b, I believe. So let's see, after pressing enter, the system will automatically reboot. This is a weird thing with ASRock. A lot of motherboards can update the BIOS fully inside of the BIOS. ASRock requires you to restart the computer into what is like a DOS mode. And for this reason, unlike Gigabyte and some other brands, you cannot update a BIOS remotely. It's really nice on Gigabyte boards that I can load the Gigabyte app and use the @BIOS application to remotely update my customers' BIOSes at 2 o'clock in the morning, you know, when the office is closed. And it works. With ASRock, I have to physically be in front of the computer for this reason, that I have to, first of all, to even go into the BIOS, I can't see the BIOS remotely. And there are business class systems where you can, right? When you're administrating hundreds of computers, you need to be able to do this from one central station. But for consumer computers, it pretty much, you know, vPro doesn't exist. And I really wish ASRock had a motherboard utility that you could load in Windows the same way Gigabyte does, where I could update the BIOS. But because they don't, any customers that I sell ASRock motherboards to that do need a BIOS update, I have to physically go to their location and do it for them. I can't walk them through it. And if it's an office with multiple computers, I definitely wouldn't want to walk them through it because they all may not be the same. And it just takes much longer over the phone. And if I can't see what's going on and they're just reading the screen to me, it's maddening. While we're waiting, let me jump back over to the chat room and see what you guys are saying. Dustin Fuller renews his membership here. Now a member for 30 months as well. Right on. Thank you, Dustin. The chat room is catching up. And while that's running, thank you to our friend Paul Gray in Australia with a $10 Australian contribution in Super Chat once again. Peter VZ joining us for the Netherlands with a €2 and €1 Super Chat. Thank you, Peter. Paul Gray says, I'm just checking my own membership, LOL. I'd say it's working, Paul. Paul's given us a number of 10 Australian dollar Super Chats today. Right on. Thank you, Paul. Mitch Morrison says, I hear New Zealand is a great country. You went to New Zealand, Mitch. He says Mitch went to Thailand, but the language is tough to learn. You just bring your Google Translate with you. You'll be fine. I mean, sure, maybe you ordered scrambled eggs stuffed in a shoe because you got the language wrong. But that leads to some good stories to tell when you get home. Well, hopefully he's having a good trip. I know he's getting ready to come home any day now. I think he's been gone long enough that starting to get homesick, I betcha. Now we do this live, unscripted and unedited, so you can see for real how long it actually takes to update a BIOS so that you can plan accordingly and experience what we're experiencing. Polished and edited videos where mistakes are taken out and time is compressed do not represent real life. So if you're using this for practical knowledge, you're very, very much misled by other videos in the process, the time involved. So here we're just trying to keep it all real as though you're with me in this room right now at my side together, just like we were sitting around at dinner. We're not speeding it up to dessert. I wish more YouTube channels kept it real. Some viewers are impatient and they're like, this takes too long. Well, those viewers are essentially demanding that I make commercials. That's how twisted our society has become. The viewers get upset when you're not making commercials for them. Those viewers are not the right viewers for us. That's okay. They're welcome to go pretty much anywhere else on YouTube is all commercials. You talk about your ad blockers when the content you're watching is nothing more than a big ad half the time. Heck, if your ad blocker really worked, it wouldn't let you watch those million-plus subscriber YouTube channels most of the time. Anyway, we're now on BIOS version 2.09, as I can see right up at the top here. We're going to load our BIOS defaults. So we're going to go to, well, I guess it's what? Maybe advanced mode. Is that under boot? Fast boot. Boot guard. I don't want any of that. Is it under exit? Load UEFI defaults. That's what I want. Yes. And now we're going to save and exit. So go up here to exit. Oh, I was already there. Save changes and exit. Right there. Turn on onboard LED in S5. Okay, so when the computer's asleep. Okay, I don't care. That's fine. It can stay on or off. I don't put the computer in S5 mode. I never put anything that doesn't have a battery in sleep mode. We're going to start up one more time, and it's going to boot back into the BIOS again because we still don't have a bootable drive. So it says no signal on the screen because that's how long it's taking the system to restart, reinitialize. What I'm curious about, however, is now that we've updated the BIOS, if I go back here and turn on, turn camera 1 back on. Again, it's going to try and find something to boot to. It can't. It takes us back in the BIOS. That's where we want to be. We're done with this flash drive. We can erase the BIOS now. I'm curious if I just plug in the HDMI cable, will the BIOS screen still be improperly configured with the capture card, or will they start talking now? One way to find out, and sometimes, as I mentioned, you have to reboot to initialize that port. So I'm going to turn it off. Wait a second, wait for the fan to stop. Then I'll turn it back on. Yeah, I'm using that power button a little more than I anticipated, but that's okay. That's what it's for. But once we've got it in the case, I'll probably never use it again unless there's a diagnostic, which there likely isn't going to be. You can see it's not initializing properly still, so it's deeper than just a BIOS issue. But that's okay. That's why we have this little $10 USB-C to HDMI cable. It's between $10 and $20. It's not expensive, which has plastic around it for some reason. And we cannot see the whole screen that way. Now, likely, when we go to install Windows 11, this won't be an issue. And just to prove that theory, let me grab my Windows 11 flash drive, my installation media. We're going to plug that into one of the blue USB ports because this is a faster flash drive that'll run faster, and our installation won't take as long if we plug it into a faster USB flash drive, USB port. So we're going to turn this off again. We're not making any changes in the BIOS. We're not adjusting the date and time. Leave it all alone. The date and time were set at the factory in Asia. There's going to be a time difference, which could lead to being yesterday or tomorrow from our time zone. But when Windows installs and we connect it to the internet, it'll self-correct. Just leave it alone. We don't have to tell the BIOS to boot to the flash drive because there's nothing else bootable. We're not installing multiple drives yet. No SATA drives. When you install Windows the first time on a new build, just have one drive plugged in. If you have other drives you want to plug in, wait until later. I don't care if they're optical drives, wait until later. If you want this to go smoothly and you don't want any mistakes, start with only one drive in the machine. Wait until Windows installs. Once you're done with that, then you can shut it off and attach your drives. Without me telling the BIOS to do anything special, it should start booting off of our Windows 11 media. And as you can see from the little symbol rotating around that looks like a toilet bowl, our screen is still not configured correctly. See how big everything is? That's really weird. Again, if you have a regular computer monitor, it's going to synchronize to that. My capture card, it's a very technical thing, and it's also several years old. They're very expensive. This capture card was $900 plus sales tax, very close to $1,000. So I don't buy a new one very often. This one's probably 5 years old. As a result, it may not be up to the latest HDMI standard in communication. I can deal with it. or I can simply plug this device in if I want it to look the way it's supposed to. The problem is I can't see the next button, you know what I mean? And likely if I plug this in now, where it was, it's not going to initialize until I restart. Let me just verify. Thankfully I've got that. Otherwise I'd be dragging out a monitor and this filming the screen, which has a lot of glare, reflection, and blurriness. It doesn't, anytime I see a content creator filming their screen, it's just terrible. I think you'll agree. You'll see this did not initialize, so we're gonna have to just turn this off one more time. I'll hold the power button in until the lights go out, usually about 10 seconds, then let it out, let it go. Same is true with a laptop, a mini PC, a desktop, across the board, every Windows computer since XP. That's how it works. We're gonna turn that back on. And this time, this should initialize as our video output, and I expect it'll work the way it should, just like it did in the BIOS. That's surprising to me, because it's one thing for the video to not be synchronized in the BIOS. It's another thing when it's already starting the Windows install. But things keep changing, and this is our current behavior. Maybe time to upgrade to that 4K capture card. But as long as I can adapt it, the show will go on. I just want to reiterate that you're likely never going to have this issue unless you are also making content with a capture card. So I'm going to get rid of camera 1 here just for a minute. So we go through our standard routine here. This is Windows 11 24H2. We want English, we want US. We're going to install Windows 11 and agree to everything's going to be deleted even though there's nothing on it. We're going to say I don't have a product key, but I will be buying a Windows 10 Pro product key and using that to activate my Windows 11 Pro. So we have to tell it what our product key is going to activate. So it's going to be activating Windows 11 Pro, even though it's a Windows 10 Pro key. That won't stay that way forever, but as long as Windows 10 is supported until October, I imagine this is going to continue working. Once you're activated, your motherboard is activated for life, even if the free upgrade no longer applies. Once you've got the free upgrade, it is yours indefinitely, as long as you don't change motherboards. We're going to hit next, accept the license agreement, and it's going to look for where we can install. It's better find our Gen 5 drive. No special drivers should be necessary. And it does appear disk 0 has been used before. I must have used it maybe in the Zyke drive or something, I don't know. But you see how we've got 3 disk 0s? These are different partitions. A brand new drive won't have any partitions on it, so we want to put this back in brand new shape. So we're going to delete the partitions on disk 0 until all we see is one disk 0 option that says unallocated space. Any other disk 0s that don't say unallocated space, we remove. Select and then delete. Takes a second. It'll combine all the unallocated space together once there's no partitions between them. And now it's just a single disk 0 that says unallocated space totaling the 2 terabyte capacity of the drive. Below that it says disk 1, and there are 4 partitions on disk 1. That is our Windows 11 flash drive that we're using. We don't want to install to that. So be sure, this is why you only want one drive when you're installing Windows. It gets really confusing. Which drive is my main C drive? If you have 2 drives that are the same and you intended for your Windows install to go on one versus the other one, how can you tell apart 2 Samsung 990s? You can't. With the same capacity, the same make and model, one says disk 0, one says disk 1, tell me which one's which. You get rid of all that confusion by just starting with one drive, and then the other drive is our USB flash drive. Then hit next, and it will confirm our settings here. Say, okay, you sure this is what you want to do? I think this is an unnecessary step. We did not have to do this with Windows installs prior. But nonetheless, it's not a big deal. It's going to pop up here in just a moment with a summary that we approve, and then it will begin to partition and format and copy over the necessary files for a Windows 11 install, reboot, and start the Windows 11 install. This delay, we've never had this delay in prior Windows 10 or 11 or 7 or 8 installs. I don't know what Microsoft's done differently here or why. and why we have to say, okay, we're ready. Like I was ready the last time I hit the button to go next. There it is. Now finally we're off to the races and it's doing its job. And now we just kick back and in a couple minutes it'll be done. Windows installs are not the long time consuming thing they used to be. Really no big deal. And then we can connect to the internet, grab the auto driver installer from ASRock, and we don't even need to hunt down the drivers. The question is, will either one of these network ports work without us adding a driver ourselves? Hopefully, one or both of these network cards will work with whatever default drivers Windows 11 has right now today. We're going to find out. We're just a few minutes shy of 2 hours. I always like to try and keep these around 2 hours. We're going to go about a half an hour over by the looks of things today. And, well, I'm happy to hang out as long as you are. Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How-To joins us. He says drive numbers relate to the position on the PCIe bus from top to bottom if you're ever unsure which drive is which. You know, I've read that, but I've seen it implemented different ways from different manufacturers. Now, maybe they've all agreed now to be on the same page, but it hasn't always been that way, especially like when you're dealing with SATA ports. Some SATA ports start at SATA 0, some start at SATA 1. For many boards, SATA 1 is actually port number 2, and SATA 1 is port 0. Some motherboards start at the bottom at SATA 0, some start at the top where the ports are located, or the ports are located flat. You have 2 additional ports, and you have some ports that are sideways. And then you have 2 SATA 0s, or you'll have a 4 or 5. It can vary from manufacturer to manufacturer. So rather than trusting the written word, my personal preference is to be certain. And the only way I can be certain is to just have one drive in. And now I don't have to trust any faith or the fact that companies are, not making mistakes. I also don't see any benefit why that information is necessary other than during your initial install. I like on my Synology NAS or in NASs in general, when a drive fails, the drive bay has a number and the light, each drive bay has its own light. So if it tells me drive 2 has failed, on a lot of NASs you can see the light for drive 2 is red, and then each bay is numbered 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't have to guess, well, it's 1 through 4 left to right, or is it 1 through 4 right to left? Or is it top to bottom, right? Because NASs can be horizontal or vertical. And while there's supposed to be a standard, I've learned in my career not to trust it. So Mike may be absolutely correct, but I'll never know because I'm not going that way. I want to see it in real life. I want to see what it really does, and I'll determine what it is. I'm also not going to dig out a manual when it's so easy to just pop a drive out if I'm trying to figure out, which drive is which. But that's just a different perspective I have. I'm more of a do-it guy rather than a read-about-it guy. Or it's not supposed to be this way. If I don't know what way it's supposed to be, I figure it out as necessary. But that's just how I do things. Happy to see Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How-Tos. He has an excellent YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed to him, or if you haven't seen any of his content, when we're done here today, you should definitely check him out. He does excellent work and posts content regularly. Very, very good at what he does. And I'm sure what he told us is true. I just don't work that way. I just want to be clear on that. I worked the same way on computers for 30 years, and I'm not about to change it now. It works. It's what gets the bills paid. But what works for you and what works for me, they're HR preferences. Now, with our Windows 11 fully installed, I can go ahead and finish our install here, which is simply to go through the same process you see me do over and over again, where we click on yes for United States and US for the keyboard layout, no secondary keyboard layout. It looks like Ethernet 2 has a driver already. So I'm going to say I don't have internet right now because I don't want it to force me into a Microsoft account. For the username, I'm just going to put in user, enter a blank password, so we go right to the desktop. I'll keep location settings on so that date and time we talked about earlier will be taken care of for us. Not only right now, but also in daylight saving time or just in the natural clock losing seconds or minutes over time. This will keep us current at all times by synchronizing with the internet time clock. With that happening, we no longer need to have the USB, where's camera one? I don't need this USB installer anymore. After the first boot, we did not need this. I typically just leave it in because I can't be bothered. But at this point, at any point after the first reboot, it's safe to remove it if you want to. Once this is done, I'll plug our Ethernet cable into it and we'll figure out, it does appear one of the two network cards at least has a driver. I don't care if it doesn't have the right driver, as long as it's a working driver that can get us online and get our updates. It's through those updates we'll get the rest of the drivers, and then we're good to go. At that point, it's time to consider a case, a cooler, and a power supply. Everything's running exactly like it should, smooth, no DOA, no dead on arrival parts, no damaged parts. Everything was unboxed, brand new for the very first time during this live unscripted video. So you should experience a similar experience if you do everything the way I've shown you. Now, if you can't wait and you start tinkering with things out of the box and playing with it, you could cause damage to them. You could static shock your RAM. You're like, oh, my RAM came in today, but my motherboard hasn't come in yet, but let me just take it out and play with it. Strongly recommend you don't do that. You might be okay, but then you might not be. Until you're ready to build, I'd say leave everything in the boxes if you want the best chance of success. Unless you're a seasoned builder, in which case you don't need to take any advice from me. Now, my Ethernet cable's down here. Let's see what happens if I plug this in. I got a green and a yellow Ethernet port back here. Not green, it's blue. I have a blue port, which is probably 2.5. Let me plug that in. We'll watch the lower right corner and see if that little globe starts to blink. Yep. So there's apparently a driver there. On the other port, if I unplug this again, it'll turn back into a globe. If I go to the yellow port, that's probably our 5 gig port. I'll bet you there's no driver on that. Oh, there's a driver on that one too. I'm impressed. A lot of times when you get these latest chipsets, there are going to be things like Ethernet drivers that Windows 11 simply doesn't have. By just connecting it to the internet, the auto driver installer says, hey, you want to grab your drivers automatically from ASRock? Why, yes, I do. Yes, I would. Thank you very much. It says, all right, well, you accept to give us your firstborn? Oh, that's fine. Have them. I'll pay you to take them. And then after that, it'll come back up here with an application that's going to analyze what drivers we have. And if there are newer drivers or missing drivers, it'll offer those to us. So we're going to click yes to allow that to occur. Yes, it has to snoop on you. It has to know what you have to know what you're missing. And it can't do that without doing an inventory. So if you're a privacy person, you never want to do this because, you know, Big Brother in the sky will see what processor you have. Oh no. Okay, but you know, to each their own. You can't analyze what you have without looking at what you, it can't help you without knowing what help you need. So it's simply doing this in order to fulfill its job that you've asked it to do. And as you can see, we have a number of drivers it's recommending. Our INF driver, our NPU driver, our VGA driver, our Killer Performance Suite, which is the network card, Killer network card, the HD audio driver, and the HD audio application. You can grab a generic audio driver all day long, but if you want the application that gives you all of the controls of the audio, you need to get that from the manufacturer in most cases. We have a management engine driver, an Intel Serial I/O driver, a dynamic tuning technology driver, the GNA scoring accelerator driver, the Intel Bluetooth, and the rapid storage or RST driver. That all sounds good. There's, you know, watch down here for any Norton or McAfee being snuck in there. I'm happy to see ASRock isn't doing that. Hit the update button. It warns you the system may reboot. Of course, that's normal. And we're off to the races with that. And while that runs, I'll put back camera one and go back over to the chat room. Our Fred Buster is checking out. It's a little bit late there in Scotland. Thanks for hanging out with us, Buster. Always good to see you, my friend. Rick Lake says, I agree with what Carrie just said about Mike's unboxing reviews and how to. You need to watch his YouTube channel. Absolutely. Money back guarantee. Oh, he's very good. He says he just passed 1 million views in 28 days milestone. Very pleased. Well deserved. Absolutely. Jose Lopez with a $1 super chat. Thank you, Jose. He says hello. Matthew Burden renews membership, now a member for 30 months. He says, good afternoon, Carrie and all in chat. Hopefully everyone's having a good day. Hey, it's Friday. It's got to be a good day. Paul Gray contributes 10 Australian dollars again. Thank you, Paul. Cheers, Paul. Is it wrong that I'm thinking of the movie Paul? That alien movie.
Is this a good time to check email?
Yeah, you know what? This is a good time to check email. Thank you for reminding me. Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How-To says, congrats, you now have a system with an NPU, ready for Windows recall. Woohoo! Sometimes I wish I did have Windows recall. When a customer calls, says my computer crashed, I go, what was the error message? I don't know. What were you doing when it happened? I was in an app. I would love to be able to see what they were doing just prior to the crash. And Windows Recall would afford that opportunity for me to diagnose the system much more efficiently. On the other hand, I wouldn't want too much of my customer's drive space holding too big of a reserve of images. But at the same time, when you're dealing with employees, and we've got employees doing things like checking their horoscopes on the clock, filling out personal credit card applications on the clock, looking at biorhythm and astrology on the clock, shopping on eBay on the clock, Windows Recall will do a lot to discourage that employee misbehavior, because an employee doesn't own that computer, and the employee is being paid to do work. And instead of having to put spyware on the machine to spy on the employees, which I've had to do in the past when we've had employees that, well, when the boss isn't looking, they're doing all kinds of checking their personal stocks. They're looking at their kids' sporting information with their team and what upcoming games and averages for each player. Everything but working, using the office equipment, the office itself, the office internet, and the boss doesn't know what's going on. Windows Recall will go a long way to discouraging that behavior, where we can sit down with the employees and make sure they are aware. You are being watched. This is not your home computer. We don't allow this at the office. You're jeopardizing the data integrity for all of our customers when you go do unauthorized things. Now, if we want to set up our clients with, like, on the guest Wi-Fi and let them use your cell phones, that's a different thing, and that's up to the business owner. But we don't want them using office equipment for personal items. And I think all this negativity about Windows Recall is really a one-sided coin. There's a whole nother side to this where it may be quite beneficial. It's not for everybody, but what is? Now, I have been disabling Windows Recall on all the machines here, even though it's not yet implemented. But I'm very curious about how that might make my life for my businesses so much more efficient. But for a home user, it's a different story. And again, it may still apply when you have kids and you want to know what the heck is going on when you're not looking. How do you think these kids end up meeting strangers and getting kidnapped and taken away and taken out of state? If you had that Windows Recall feature, that would help, except your kids are probably not using a Windows computer. They're probably using their phones, and as such, it'll be a non-issue unless you're looking at a cheating spouse or something. But nonetheless, it's not all negative. It could be there to protect you. It's for each of us to decide. It is not universally good. It is not universally bad. but it's definitely jump on the bandwagon and call it bad. But the bandwagon is all consumers. In the meantime, let me check email here. And, you know, I don't know what Mike does for a living, if it's full-time YouTube, but he's very knowledgeable as a technician. A lot of people that are enthusiasts don't have the knowledge that Mike has, and I respect his channel a lot because he knows what he's talking about. But I can't help but wonder that he's not working in a corporate environment where he sees the benefits of Windows Recall. That's why I'm wondering, like, why did he immediately go to the bad? Or it's all just a joke and we don't know each other that well, which is also very possible as well. Now, the problem is there's too many people very, very angry about it, being very vocal online. So I just assume that bandwagon, but he might have meant it in jest. What do we have? What do we have? Wow, a lot of emails came in while I wasn't paying attention. Took me a minute. We've got William Denton, who sends us an Amazon gift card for $50. He goes, this can go toward the extra build cost of today's Ultra 7 build, or of course, wherever you'd like. Well, thank you, William, as always. We are still going to have to get a case, a power supply, a cooler. We don't have to get that right now, but I mean, so far, it looks like the build will progress, that there's nothing to fix or address before that. And we're certainly open to suggestions for any unusual cases that aren't big monsters that will look good. It's got to look good. Ron Barnish sends an Amazon gift card. Says, late for the video today, I was watching another member's first video at Fly with K YouTube channel. She is cool. Haven't heard of that channel. Thank you for the $10 Amazon gift card from Ron Barnish. Paul Gray sends an Amazon gift card as well. Very generous Amazon gift card. He says, I hope you enjoy this Amazon gift card towards new parts needed. Well, again, we're open to suggestions for any, I'm thinking of a black case with a window to show this off. Clearly, it's very visual. On the other hand, I don't want the case to be monstrous and heavy. I was very frustrated yesterday looking at cases because I feel like it's just the same thing over and over. You have your boring, straight, as nice as Be Quiet cases are in the NZXT, they all look alike. We've already been there and done that. Nothing wrong with them. They're good cases. I'd like to do something different. And a lot of what I'm seeing different, they're not giving us 2 full USB ports up front, or there's no cable management consideration, or it's just the same thing and just not done as well as other manufacturers. But there's so many out there, I'm sure there's some I haven't seen yet. We're just going to let this continue to do what it's doing. It's still updating. Alan Linda sends an Amazon gift card for $7.77. Thank you, Alan. Of course, earlier today, we had an Amazon gift card from Mark Gaines joining us in Northern Ireland. And I see yet another Amazon gift card from our friend Paul Gray in Australia. Well, I think those are probably those gift cards today, and especially recently from Buster and Paul Gray, that are sizable amounts, reduce the number of gift cards we need to add up for what it's going to cost to get the case, power supply, and cooler. I think if we're not there already, we're pretty darn close. We just got to figure out which cooler, which case. Power supply, not a hard decision, right? We want a black power supply, probably modular to keep the cabling clean, since it's going to be a very visual piece here. Obviously, these aren't back rear connected motherboards, so we don't have to worry about a case limiting with that. If you know of something you think is going to look really good, let me know. Leave it in the comment section below. What are you smiling about?
RGB power supply.
GameMax makes an RGB.
Just saying.
But if the case we use has an RGB shroud, it'll cover it up.
Okay. Either one is great.
Here's the deal. If you get the RGB shroud, you hide all the extra cabling real easy. but it also means you're wasting money on an RGB power supply. And we were looking at cases last night, and I did see that one that had no power supply shroud, and it looked to me like it was 20 years old. I'm so used to having power supply shrouds. Unless the power supply shroud has a cutout designed to shine the RGB through it, and that usually means you got to put the power supply upside down where the fan is inside.
Like
right, Thermaltake will do that.
Yeah.
Or like the Xenos build.
Yeah.
Right? It's pretty unusual.
Yeah.
I'd much rather have the fan drawing air in from outside rather than from inside the
It's
case.
just that board is gorgeous, and I just.
This board here?
Yeah.
You think it's
gorgeous?
gorgeous? It's gorgeous.
It's gorgeous, and it needs, as much as we can make it shine, I think would be great.
Let me take a look at the device manager here real quick and make sure that we're not missing any more device drivers. Right click on the start menu. We're going to go to device manager here, and hopefully everything is happy. The network adapters are made by who? An Intel Wi-Fi 7 BE200, a Killer branded 2.5 gig, and a Realtek branded 5 gig. We've got a little of everything in here. Of course, we do have Thunderbolt, and we have well, if it's Thunderbolt 4, it'll be USB 4 as well. That means we're going to get that 40 gigabit per second speeds, and we have 2 of them. If I right click and go to System, we should see our processor being recognized as the Ultra 7 265K. We see the 2 24 gig sticks of RAM for a total of 48 gigs. Our onboard graphics card is sharing some of our RAM. That's why only 47.4 is available. When you buy a graphics card, you'll see it comes with its own RAM because the graphics card is included in the CPU. It has no RAM of its own, so you have to share. But we got plenty of RAM. We are Windows 11 Pro 24H2. That being said, we can hit Windows Update just to get the latest and greatest, because all we did were drivers, not Windows updates. That's a different thing entirely. I like to turn this feature on, go to Advanced Options, and I like to turn this on, and this on, and this on. If you see any optional updates down here, I would grab those as well, unless they're for a printer, because they may change your printer interface, and you may not like that. That's been the reaction from my customers anyway. So I leave any driver updates alone, or I will do that with the customer by my side. So if there's a change to the interface and how it works, I can address any concerns or roll it back if they don't like it. Let's see, what are we talking about here in the chat room? Frank Jimmy says that motherboard went together like butter. You're right. All this hatred for the new line of Intel chips is definitely undeserved. I understand the biggest complaint is there's no real performance gain from the previous gen, but with Intel stating there's some BIOS updates in Windows updates that are going to address this, that they're not running correctly, I don't know how Intel makes that mistake. And I don't know if these fixes are going to make a big difference or a minor difference. But we do know the chips aren't bad. There's nothing wrong with them. And if you want the latest chipset and you want to be able to have a newer platform where there's, we're not just spit polishing previous generations until you can't push it any further, which is what they did. That's why there were problems. They pushed it too far. This is brand new technology. We're starting on the first floor. You're not going to nail it on your first attempt, but it's not terrible. If it's not any worse, okay, there's no reason to not buy it, and then you're in the current platform. That's my perspective on it. But I'm also not a gamer, and if I was, I'd probably be more towards AMD right now, assuming I could buy one of those chips, the 9800 X3D, that's all sold out. And sometimes it's just timing. That same exact 9800 X3D could have come out in June and nobody bought it. But now with the issues that have cropped up with Intel and some disappointing results from AMD, combined with people just got some money burning a hole in their pocket, they haven't spent it because there's been nothing to buy that's met their standard. Finally, something came out that did, and now AMD can't keep them in stock. So it's not just about the product, it's about the timing. And I want you to keep that in mind, because in a couple of months, there's going to be a better chip than that. And the X3D 9800 isn't really going to be as desirable as it is today. Timing, just like in real estate, location, location, location. Same property, Same building materials, built at the same time, and the only difference is it's located somewhere else, sells for a completely different price, more or less desirable on its location. Is it close to town, in a bad neighborhood? Is it sitting on a lot of property? Is it sitting in a highly desirable location? Same exact house, same building materials, same everything, but the price can be markedly different just because it's over here instead of over there. Releasing a product isn't just about releasing a good product, and not just about releasing it at an affordable price, or I should say at a price people are willing to pay. You also have to release it at the right time in our culture, in our history. And if you nail all three of those things, you have a product you can't keep in stock. That's why you don't see it happen every day. Samuel Kowalski says, is Secure Boot enabled? Well, by default, when you're building a system and you choose your BIOS defaults, all that's turned on for you now, unless your system's several years old. But if you want to check it, and it's an easy thing to check, we go over here to, if I go to full screen mode, and I normally will show the Windows security icon down here, and I can do that now if I go to taskbar settings. I turn the widgets off and the task view off. I go to other system tray icons. I turn off Microsoft OneDrive, but I turn everything else on here. And then when I look at that bottom right corner, I should see our Windows security. Now we do have that hazard triangle, and that's usually because we don't have a Microsoft account. Let's go ahead and bring that up. And for sure, it wants us to set up OneDrive. I'm not going to set up OneDrive. This is not my computer. This may go to a customer. They can set up their OneDrive. So I dismiss that. Then for Microsoft account protection, once again, I don't use a Microsoft account. This does not apply to me. Everything else with device security is all enabled by default, from core isolation, data encryption, security. All of that is on by default. The only time you'll see that different is in some pre-builts, especially if you're buying from a questionable manufacturer or from a questionable source like AliExpress or Facebook, or Facebook Marketplace, eBay. You might get some questionable goods. But if you're building your own system, and it's a modern system built within parts from the last 4 or 5 years, all that should be turned on by default unless you or somebody else has gone in there and changed it. So there doesn't hurt to check it, but if everything's working the way it should, you shouldn't need to check it. We're going to type in search permissions right there. I want to get rid of that little cartoon thing down at the bottom of the search window. Scroll to the last option under more settings, turn that off. Drives me crazy. I also don't like notifications, so I'm going to just type in notification, hit enter. I'm going to turn that off too. That's my personal preferences and the way I set it for my clients. Now in doing that, I did close Windows updates, but it's still running in the background. We didn't disrupt it, we just kind of hid it. So we go back to Windows Update, it'll show us where it's currently at. It made no impact on pausing it. It didn't pause it or anything like that. We'll let that finish so we can restart. I will go to SCD keys, and I'm going to buy a Windows 10 Pro key because it's a few dollars cheaper than a Windows 11 Pro key. And we're going to enter the Windows 10 Pro key right into Windows 11, and it's going to activate and stay tied to the motherboard for life. We never need to enter that key ever again. Even if we wipe it and reinstall, when I choose, I don't have a product key, but still pick Windows 11 Pro as my version. As soon as I connect to the internet, it'll reassign the product key based on the serial number of the motherboard automatically and reactivate without even telling me it's doing it. It's pretty convenient. Unfortunately, Microsoft Office doesn't work that way. Microsoft Office 2016, as far as I know, is the last version that you don't need a Microsoft account to activate. It's only like 20 bucks over at SCD Keys, and I pinned the link to the comments if you want to take advantage of that deal. I will make a video demonstrating how to do that, but I can't do it live because it would expose the product key and expose all my account information. So I have to make the video, and then I have to blur out all my private info so I can show you, here's how you go and buy it, apply your product code, here's how you pay for it. PayPal is accepted and is my personal preference on how to pay. And then how you find your product key, which is, it sends you in an email, but some people don't know, and your entire product purchase history is stored at SCD keys so that, 3 years from now, if you need to look that product key up, you just log in to your account on SCD Keys, And you can see your entire purchase history going back to your very first purchase for years and years and years. It's all still there. It may not make that product key work because you've already activated it, but it's still there if you need to recover it. Some people are confused on how all that works, and it's an easy enough thing to show you, but the editing and blurring out all of my private information and product keys is a pain in the butt. But we'll do it. I think Office 2019 and 2021 require a Microsoft account. And do know, please do know, Windows 11 23H2 will expire shortly after Windows 10 does. So Windows 10 expiration is set for October 14th of 2025, and Windows 11 23H2 support, I believe, ends in November of 2025, just a couple weeks later. So if you don't like 24H2 and you're avoiding 24H2, you've got a year. After that, you won't be getting any more updates to 23H2, which puts you back into the same position Windows 10 users will be in. The same holds true on on Microsoft Office 2016 and 2019. They expire within days after Windows 10 expires in October. Now, it'll still work, but you're not going to get updates anymore. I know people that are still running Office 2010. It's not a good idea, but do what you got to do. If you're looking for a free version of Office, just download LibreOffice and be done with it. Or use Google's Write and Google's spreadsheet program. They're free with Google. But if you insist on using Microsoft Office, I strongly encourage you to use a supported version, because the threat actors that are out there are worse than ever, and they're only getting worser. Is that a word? And they're becoming, people are seeing how easy it is to basically steal from people because they're not getting support anymore. So it's just like you're leaving it out for anybody to take. They tell their friends, so their friends go, I'll do that too. And then the number of threats keeps doubling and tripling like every other month. It's crazy because there's no enforcement. Somebody in Russia broke a US law. How does the US enforce that? They can't. You don't live in the US. US laws don't apply, and there's no extradition or cooperation because we don't have a treaty with them. So they are free of any punishment from law enforcement. They have nothing to lose, only to gain. So if you leave yourself vulnerable, if you refuse to roll your windows up and lock your car doors because you live in a safe neighborhood and you leave valuable items in your car, that would be great if we lived in a world where you could do that. Unfortunately, when you make it easy for a thief, you turn people into thieves. It's almost your fault that you entice them, it's not you're still a victim, don't get me wrong. But if you make it easy for them, they might not have done it otherwise, except you tempted them. And it was so irresistible, they couldn't refuse. And then you're going to say, woe is me, I got robbed. Well, it was just a matter of time. You made it too easy. So as long as you're running a supported operating system and supported software, you should be fine getting all those latest updates, as long as you're not clicking on every link and downloading every program and just basically inviting them in is what you're doing at that point. That's a different situation altogether. Now, I think the screen just went to sleep on me there. I'm not sure if it was loading a video driver. I don't think it was. I think it just went to sleep. So I do like to adjust those power and sleep settings so it doesn't do that during a live video. And it just occurred to me I haven't done that. So real quick, we'll go back over to full screen. Whoops, full screen. Which, by the way, you're watching it probably in full screen. I can't watch it in full screen without blocking out all the chat room information. So I don't like to keep it in full screen mode, but I have to see the small text here. We want edit power plan, and I don't want this computer to ever go to sleep because it's not on any batteries, so there's no point in that. But I do want the display to turn off after 3 hours. That'll save electricity. Also, I don't want it to sleep after 10 minutes and then it goes to sleep and says no signal while we're live doing updates. I mean, it's still installing updates and it's already going, putting the monitor to sleep. The monitor can sleep, that's fine. I just don't want the computer to sleep. Again, unless the computer has batteries. Looking back here at the chat, let's see what people are talking about here. Again, these are my preferences, and these are the advice I give my clients. I offer the same advice to you for free. You may choose to reject it. My clients who pay me for it don't reject it. Only people who don't pay for the advice, those are the only people who will reject my advice. That is one thing I have found true. When you give it away for free, it has no value. And when people pay for it, they say thank you and they appreciate it and value it more. So I'm not telling you what to do because you're not paying me. And if you were paying me, I wouldn't have to tell you what to do because that's why you're paying me. But when you're getting it for free, there's always resistance, like as though I'm telling you what to do. Make no mistake, I don't care what you do. Let's go ahead and restart now. The very fact I have to explain that to an audience never happened in the real world where people were paying me. I never had to say that. But that is the side effect when you do something for free. It loses value to many people. When you charge people, it's a whole different resolution, different response, universally, which is weird. I think it's weird. You'd think the people getting it for free would appreciate it, and the people paying for it would question it. But it's completely the other way around. Do know this if you plan on going into business for yourself. It's never in your benefit to give away anything for free unless you want to go out of business and deal with frustrating customers and people who want to argue and challenge you when there's no money in it and you're not getting any work done. Let's see, scrolling through here, what else are we missing? Cooler Master. This is from John Paul Bacon. He says the Cooler Master HAFXB Evo is a different style of case. It's a little older, but it is on the larger side for being a land box cube style. I've had mine for about 8 years and it has served me well. I won't buy a case that's 8 years old. I also don't want a cube case. What I'd prefer is a tower style of case. If it's dual chamber, if it's not too wide, I'm okay with it. But the minute it becomes more square than rectangular, or it has to lay flat like a desktop, old school, I'm not interested in that. I also need those two USB 3.0 ports up front and preferably a USB Type-C up front. If it has anything less than that, I'm not interested. It's too old. There's no point in paying all the extra money for these ports and not being able to use them because I cheaped out on a case. There are plenty of cases like the 200R, which are fantastic today, but the Corsair 200R still only has two USB 3 ports up front. Some of them are even USB 2 ports if you go back far enough, I believe. There is no Type-C. And for my business clients, that's fine for now. But for me personally, like when we're live and I have to download something on the streamer, I need to plug a flash drive in and I need to do it up front where it's fast. And I might already have my Bluetooth receiver for my keyboard plugged in, so I'm already using two. And then it just remains with the USB Type-C, which I very rarely use. I like the convenience of having it up front. What I like more is that I've paid for something and I've got it available. What I don't like is paying for a USB Type-C header and having a motherboard that won't provide it to me. Or paying for two USB ports and having a case, that's what I meant to say, a case that won't provide it to me. Having two USB plugs, or two USB ports on every plug, and then I plug the case into it, and it only gives me one of those two. Where did the other one go? You don't get it. But I paid for it. Yeah, well, the case manufacturer decided they didn't want to spend the extra nickel, so you could go without. Well, I'll spend the extra nickel. I'll buy a better case. That's critical to me. Look, some NZXT cases give me two USB 3s and two USB 2s and a Type-C right up at the front of the case. Yes, please. I'd rather have more than I'm going to use. But I definitely don't want them stealing a port or omitting a port that I've paid for on my motherboard. That suggests to me that's not the right case. If I have an older system, then an older case makes sense. I appreciate the suggestion that for those reasons I would not consider a case of that age. Any case more than 4 years old, I'm going to tell you right now, don't even bother. Not interested. If we're building a 4-year-old system, different story. I know Mike's Unboxing and Reviews and How To has reviewed a number of cases, and I know he's got a few there that he likes as well. Some of the cases he uses there in England are not available to us in the US though. But be interested in what he thinks in them. You know, and if it matters, you know, to another system builder, the number of USB ports you get up front. I mean, I'm assuming he's selling these to somebody. Do they care? My customers care. I care. Ron Barnish says, Flying with Kay is a YouTube channel that shows her flying her airplane. Oh, you know, there are a lot of really fantastic airline or airplane enthusiast videos out there. Pilots are an incredibly enthusiast group of people that really enjoy their work. They'll make big home simulators. They'll put up videos showing pilot error and footage from the cockpit of different types of planes and how they fly. And yeah, I mean, if you're into that, it's pretty fascinating stuff. I watch maybe one of these every few months, but I couldn't watch more than that. It's just, it gets a little too boring for me to just sit there and, okay, well, that's how a plane works. Okay, the cockpit's a little interesting how they've gone digital. You get an idea of what buttons they're pressing and why, and then it's always the same after that. Oh, look, it's more landscape. Okay. Oh, look, it took off. That's what a plane does. So there's obviously a bug there that really pulls people in who enjoy the idea of being aloft. It's science to me. It's sort of like, well, yeah, that's how physics works. But there are a lot of enthusiast pilots, real pilots that also they just can't get enough. And they have some fantastic YouTube channels, and that's what it sounds like you're describing there. There's some pretty interesting electric gliders too that are pretty darn cool, where you're enclosed in a very small plane. It's not like a hang glider, although I think they have those too, but it's a proper glider where you're enclosed in a single seat cockpit with an electric motor that takes you up. And then the electric motor shuts off, and then you glide without a tow plane. It's pretty darn cool. Not quite as complicated as an engined propelled aircraft, but it kind of it's a neat balance of the two. I'm seeing purple out of the corner of my eye. It's definitely, well, it's cycling through colors here, but it's that cooler is actually working quite well, better than I suspected. But I do want to put a liquid cooler on it for looks. Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How-To says the Montec 913 is great and it's cheap. Montec 913. Let me take a quick look over here at Amazon. I don't know that brand. Do we have those in the US? Montec 913. I will have to watch Mike's review of it. Oh yeah, there it is. It is cheap, $63. Clear glass, not smoked glass. Let's bring it up here so everybody can see it, and you can tell me if I'm looking at the right thing, Mike. Window capture on. Let's get rid of these. Here we go. Montec XR ATX mid-tower PC 320 millimeter fans. Yeah, there's two there, one in the back. Ports up front. We got our two USB 3s. Looks like a Type C. What is this? Is this a USB single port here, or is this a button for controlling the RGB? No, the ports look fine. I mean, either way. Oh, tells us what it is right here. Power button, reset button, separate headphone and microphone. I think that's weird, but that's okay. It's not a deal killer. Two USB 3s and a Type. Well, that's beautiful. That's exactly what I'm talking about. This does look very similar to the Leon Lee 011. But can we put a liquid cooler in here? Would this work? Shows a 360 millimeter cooler will fit up here. So here's my concern. If I put the radiator up top, then I can never put anything on top of this flat surface because it'll block the fans and my system will overheat. I'd have a really bad habit of doing that. So I'd like to put the cooler facing forward, but I can't do that here because of the glass panel. The cooler maybe could go at the bottom. It shows a 120 times 3 millimeter. No, it's going to be too tall, isn't it? It's going to hit the bottom of the board. That's why they're just talking about fans here, not coolers, I think. If we left it with the air cooler on it, it'd be fine. Or, you know, if I just learned not to put stuff on top of the case while the system's running and then wonder, what's that smell? Oh, I'm blocking the radiator. I do wish cases that had the top-mounted radiators would be slanted, you know, discourage you from placing items on top. Everybody does this. They just forget. They don't think about it. They'll put paperwork up there, boxes. It's a flat surface below the desk. We stack stuff on it, and we end up blocking the radiators. It's a good-looking case, though. I do agree. And it is a good price. What are these other ones? Oh, there's a mesh. That's not bad. Kind of looks a little bit like a fractal design. Okay, that's fine. What is the size? Oh, glass panel there. Power supply shroud. We've got a big space here between the, notice where the motherboard ends and where the fans start above it. That's a good spacing. However, it does put me in the same position for a top-mounted radiator that needs air. Anytime they put fans at the top, I always end up blocking those fans. So I really don't want fans at the top. Now those fans can come out. They're just there for looks anyway. This does show we could front mount the radiator right through the front here. I am worried at that price though. What's the cable management look like here? It looks like we don't have a lot of room for cables. When that motherboard tray is right up against where the side panel locks in, there's not a lot of room for cables. I can't tell from this photo, but I do wish there was much more room. Like to me, it's going to be tight. You're going to have to run cables right through this section on the left side and then try and get them down in the power supply shroud to hide them. So I think that might explain the cheaper price. It looks decent. And again, if I wasn't putting a liquid cooler in it, it would be no problem. It'd be a very easy decision for me to make. It's definitely a case manufacturer we've never worked with before, and that gives us variety, which is what I'm looking for. But I definitely want to avoid top fans regardless. I do appreciate the suggestion though. What else you got? Keep them coming. The problem with being picky is I know what I want. That either makes the decision really easy or really difficult, right? Because we've worked with a number of cases I really like, but because we've already done that, it's nothing new for the channel. And I'm picturing in my head a liquid cooler on this. I don't know which one, but I do know I want to be able to see this. Now, it doesn't have to be a clear cover like it does on the white build from yesterday. This could be a smoked cover because the RGB will shine through, and that's good enough. We don't need to see the board, you know, more than that. On the other build from yesterday, we do. Otherwise, most of the attraction is hidden behind the smoked glass. So if we went with a black case with smoked glass without fans on the top that I can mount a radiator in on the front, it does immediately take me back to the NZXT H7. That's what comes to mind. But I'm sure there's some others out there we haven't considered. And I also don't want anything that's, you know, massive. I'd rather it was as close to a standard tower as we could get, but unique. You know, there's a company called ASRock. And ASA makes these really bizarre cases. They're not necessarily good. They're not necessarily bad. But if you're not familiar with them, when it comes to looking for something different, I immediately go to ASA and see what they have. Now, they might be hot dogs in the sense that you don't want to know how they're made. But let me bring that up real quick and I'll show you what I'm talking about. These are ASA cases. They've got the big triangle here, which is a nightmare to work on, and it's huge. Very difficult to move that around. They've got the cube. We've already built a cube. They've got another cube. We've already built a cube. So again, we don't need to repeat that. They're also very expensive. We've got another triangle or a pyramid case. This is their attempt at normal, I guess, but I don't see much different about that to make it worth. Especially at 60 bucks, we're probably back to the same kind of build quality as that Black Widow, I'll betcha. For some reason, they've sort of chamfered the corner off of this. I don't know what the appeal is. If you want a cube, I don't find anything about that appealing personally. It's going to be massive if it's going to hold an ATX motherboard. A full-size ATX motherboard laying flat, that's going to take up a lot of desktop real estate. It's definitely not something you'd put on the floor. It just seems impractical. There's another basic case, again, at that price that scares me with cable management, potential issues. It might be okay, but I found ASA to be more about looks than about quality. There's our Montech, comes up as a sponsored link. That's interesting. This ASA case I find intriguing. Now, it's $370. And I don't believe we can put a full-size ATX. This is probably micro ATX. Yeah, this is micro ATX only, so this motherboard won't even fit in there. I like that. And I like how we have our two USB Type A's and our Type C. There's no headphone jack on there. It'd be nice if it had one, but not a deal breaker. It's unique, something we've never worked with before. But unfortunately, despite meeting all of these requirements, we can't fit the motherboard in it. And our Cooler Master N100 is very similar to that. So that's what we're looking for. We're just looking for something a little bit different. We've worked with Musetechs in the past. That's not terrible. There was a company called, what was it called? Asia First or something. Wrong keyboard, Carrie. Go over here. Asia First. I can't remember. ATX case. I'm sure Amazon will autocorrect. They'll know what I mean. Or won't they? Maybe not. Maybe it was one word. Maybe that's part of my problem. No. Well, golly gosh darn, what the heck was it called? I'm going to cheat and look on my phone because I think I saved it. I'm not logged into Amazon on the one I share with you here on screen for obvious privacy concerns. Now, there is a bigger version of the Johnsbow case. We did build in the TK1, but there is a Johnsbow TK2 that I think will house a full-size ATX motherboard. And you can see the cooler can go, the liquid cooler can go right to the back here, right? So it keeps it out of the way. Now they've got a cooler up at top, but I don't have to put that in. I can move that cooler here instead, over to the right. But it's very similar. I don't like that they're only giving me one USB Type-C port. Where's my other one? They've stolen it. At this price point, that's unacceptable. Never mind. I'm no longer interested. The other case I was looking at is called Asia Horse. So we'll go up here and type in Asia Horse. Whoa, look at that. I love Bluetooth keyboards. Asia Horse. Oh, I see. I hit the caps lock. ATX. Now look at this funky thing. This looks like it came out of the movie Dune. It's very unusual. It's a bit bigger than what I was looking for, but it's also different. But then guess where they lost me? One USB port, type A. Where's my other one? Remember, that has to plug into a plug that supports two. I lose a USB port. Well, I also pay $180 for this? Are you out of your mind? Look how big that thing is. I'm willing to say, okay, I'll go a bit bigger than I want as long as I can get everything I want. It certainly has room for it, so why are you not giving it to me? Because it cost them an extra nickel. Okay, we're done with that one. There was another one I was looking at that I found intriguing, and I haven't found a reason to not use it. But let's take a closer look right now. Geometric Future. Model M5. This, well, I was intrigued with the black and yellow. Now I realize you can make that color of LEDs whatever you want, but that black and yellow combination sure does look sharp to me. Again, it's kind of a similar design in the sense of the glass being in the front, and the cooler does have to go up on top, which again, I'm not a fan of that. But notice this little section here where we have our USB ports. I do prefer these either be at the bottom or the top, or you might have some dangling USB drives or external SSDs that can't reach the bottom and can't reach the top, so you plug them into the front and you have to let them hang by their cable. Not a fan of that, but I do like the way the case looks. Now I think they have another model of this. Let me just go back and look at my search results here. Oh, so this Geometric Future is a very interesting case maker. I've never seen this one before. Is this micro ATX? Oh, it's mini ITX. Well, that's not going to work. And then they have it in different colors, gray and white. It's attractive. I like it, but I like the design. Now this M5, that's the one I was trying to pull up. I think that's the same thing. It's just, okay, this is the one that caught my eye with the yellow front, right? And then you set your LEDs to be all yellow, and maybe the cooler could go right here in the front of the case instead of at the top. Now they're using apparently their own brand of cooler. So this could be a very unique project for us. If I went with this to see if I can fit that cooler up here in the front, keep the top free of any fans. We do lose that RGB, but usually you can't see these top RGB lights anyway. As we've demonstrated on previous builds, I have to tilt the case back for people to see that. So as long as we have RGB in the front and in the back, we can see the liquid cooler in the RAM RGB. We're not going to put a graphics card in here. They've also have RGB fans on the bottom, which I could take or leave. Quite honestly, they're just for looks. This has me quite interested. This is different. This is a manufacturer we've never worked with before. I do have an issue with everything being in the middle right there because, again, if it's a flash drive, it's no big deal. But with like the SanDisk SSDs I've got, those are going to dangle. They're just going to hang. There's not a long enough cable for them to rest on the floor, so they'll be hanging by their own weight. This is also true of the mechanical drives I have from Seagate and Western Digital that plug into USB. They're going to hang by their own weight. That's not ideal. I don't like this position, but I also don't think it's a deal killer. I don't know. You guys will have to let me know what you think. And if I did that, I would certainly get their cooler just to see what it's like. And you're looking at $150 for that case. The power supply is going to be hidden in the back, so that won't matter. And who knows, maybe somebody's got a review on this and I can see it in more detail, but it looks like cable management. You've got all the space. You see where it's yellow? That's the back of the motherboard tray. So that's a lot of room for cables to go. It says it supports up to a 420 millimeter radiator at the top. My question is, what does it support at the front? Because I don't need 340 millimeter fans up there. Certainly not for this Ultra 7 build. This does look like it will hold a radiator in the front. All mounting locations in the main chamber are fully compatible with 120 or 140 millimeter fans. Okay, but what about radiators? They keep showing a radiator only on top. What about the front? Wait, supports vertical installation of graphics card. Oh, I want vertical installation of my cooler. See, this is my concern. You see how thin this area is right here? See how the fans are mounted on the outside of the case instead of the inside of the case? I think this could work if we left the fans off the top, because that fan is going to interfere with the radiator. Trying to think this through. If we get a radiator with RGB fans, then we'd put the radiator on the outside of the case, but then I wonder, will this panel fit back over that radiator? Because if we put the radiator inside of the case vertically and then add the fans, it's probably going to hit the, whatever this is over here. Looks like some cable management stuff over here. Maybe. I don't know. I really don't know, because it looks like the end of the motherboard is way over here. Front supports, you see, it says the front only supports fans. It doesn't say it supports a radiator. Whereas the top is very much specifying a cooler, a liquid cooler. See here? Fan, radiator, radiator. Well, wait a minute. I mean, it's showing a gold bar. That gold bar right there. You know, we could buy it and try, right? What's the worst that can happen? I have to put the radiator on top, and just don't put stuff on top of the case, Carrie. I just want it all. What's so unreasonable about that? Give me everything and make it cheap. Let's take a look at the chat room and see what you guys are saying about some of these cases. Thermal Take Series or Cirrus 500 or Cirrus 300. You know, we haven't built in those Thermal Take cases. We've certainly done the Tower 300, the Tower 100, the helicopter case. We've done a number of Thermal Take. The Cirrus, let me pull that up real quick. That might be a good solution as well. I do like the quality of Thermaltech cases, even though they don't usually give us much consideration for cable management. Let's go back to the window capture here. So the 300, I'm thinking 300 is going to be smaller, right? So that's probably... No, it says it's an eATX, that it takes an extended ATX. It's cheap. Thermaltake cases are really, really good bargains for what you get. Wow, the fan's going to go on the top. It's not terrible. What's the 500 look like? Is that the size of a building? Let's get rid of this RGB stuff. Just type in. See what our options are. Look how cheap they are. Very inexpensive. We want black. So this one's taller, right? The 500. Can we put a radiator vertically here? Ports are, all right, at least maybe the cable will reach to sit it on top, right? When I plug in something to this front USB. Sometimes on these Thermaltake cases, you can move the USBs if you want to. I don't know if this one allows for that. But at least if it's on the bottom, I don't have to worry about anything dangling. Or if it's on top. But then again, I'm resting things on top of the case that are blocking fans if fans are there. It's not terrible. Still looking for, oh, here we go. No, those are just fans. Show me one with a radiator in the front. Here we go. What's this show? There, yeah. That's got the radiator in front, and it has the top fans, which are fully optional. And you'd only be blocking the fans at the rear. If you put stuff on top of the case at the front, you won't be blocking the fan. You can't put a fan there because it would get in the way of the hoses from the radiator vertically mounted. So I would just delete these fans. You can't even see them anyway. Take these two fans out, and then that means whatever radiator we use has to have compatible fans or the RGB isn't going to look right. So we either make sure we get a Thermaltake radiator, which is the same as what we were talking about with the other build. Make sure the liquid cooler and the case are made by the same company so that you don't have any weird fan. The way they light up, the brightness and how they light up will be the same. Otherwise, even if you can make different manufacturers of RGB fans work and synchronize, they often don't light up the same way in brightness or in pattern. So I want all the fans to be the same for that aesthetic, not for the airflow, but for the aesthetic. So if we make sure we get Thermaltake fans with the Thermaltake radiator and a Thermaltake case, everything should fit well and look good. Now, I don't think it's a looker. I don't think anybody would look at this case and see it as something special. That's a good thing and it's a bad thing, because the more extreme we go, more often we're giving up some options, for mounting components. And again, my biggest concern is when you're wiring in all this RGB, you're going to have a lot of cable management. And I'm wondering if Thermaltake did a better job. Because let's face it, on the Tower 300, that cable management was super easy. And maybe, maybe Thermaltake is seen the way now. I think Mike did a review on this, so I'd have to go back and watch his video. We can get a look at what we've got for cable management back behind that motherboard tray. All right, those are great suggestions. I appreciate them. And it requires a little more research, but at least I have a starting point. Okay, back over to the chat. Paul Connolly says, Carrie, I want it all and I want it now. No problem. Will you be paying with Visa or MasterCard? Cash only. Mortant said he's got the Corsair iQ 5000X. That's a monster though, isn't it? Isn't that a big case? I see those big numbers and they usually translate to big cases. Now look, they do, speaking of this, Corsair does make a modern Cosmos 2 case. And I want to tell you, it is very attractive. Let me see what the case is called. I don't think they call it a Cosmos 2. Corsair case. Let's just type in Corsair case. Let's go back over to Amazon. We'll look at this together. See, this Be Quiet case is too big. It's too square. Should be tower shaped, not box shaped for my preferences. The 6500X, yeah, it's a little bit of an illusion by how they've designed it. Still a little wide for my liking. More Corsair. Corsair iQ. Oh, this is, yeah. I mean, it's not terrible. Again, it's very similar to the Leon Lee 011. And here, if you want wood grain, I suppose, you can get that. This is the 5000T, I think. Is this the... This looks awfully similar to the Cosmos 2. Oh, this says motherboard compatibility mini ITX. No, that's definitely not what I thought it was. Let me keep looking. I swear they've got a modern Cosmos 2, and they just don't call it that anymore. But I can't remember what they call it. And you think it would have came up by now. I know I'm not going to get cable management in here. I'm not even going to consider it. So if it was just a bare motherboard with a stock cooler, it would fit in there fine. But as soon as we start adding all the RGB and stuff, that's where we start getting into trouble. I see how the number gets bigger, like the 7,000, and the case gets bigger and the price gets more. So as soon as I hear those big numbers, that's usually indicative of the size of the case you're going to be working with. Now, Asus has a number of amazing cases as well. Like if you look at ASUS's ROG case, they are expensive and very heavy. Like take this case for example, you're $255. I don't really think it's that attractive, but it's different. And it's got these carrying straps on top that you can lift it up by, like shoelaces, which I think is just weird. And if I'm looking for weird, there you go. It's very heavy. So this isn't something you're going to want to cart around. And look at all the USB ports we got up here on top. A lot of port selection, and you're not dangling anything on top. There's a lot to like about this, except the price. But this one really drew my eye because, you know, it's $500. That's very reminiscent of the Cosmos 2 build. $500. Look at all the USB ports. We got 2 Type-Cs up front, 4 USB Type-As up front. You've got your power button up on top. Carrying handles built into the case so you can, one friend can grab the left side and you can grab the right. Maybe they should have just put wheels on it at this point. I bet you that sucker is heavy. Look at that RGB. I don't know what that is. Now here, this is interesting. You'll notice the fans are on top, but they're not up against the top of the case. You see this air gap? That means you can set stuff on top of this case and it's going to breathe just fine. Kudos to ASUS for thinking of that. The way the side panels open is really clever. $489, and there's going to be another $50 or so and $40 in sales tax. So you're looking at $530 for an empty case. Woo! This is the ProArt case from ASUS, no RGB. We're going to be building our ProArt build, I think next Friday, with an Ultra 9 Intel 285K. With that cooler, the ProArt case, and the ProArt motherboard. I am looking forward to that. Thank you. Thank you, ASUS, for also considering people who work for a living who don't want all that gamer nonsense. And this case should be very heavy, well-built, well-constructed, and silent because it's intended for somebody to work 8 hours a day in front of it, day after day after day, and they don't want to hear that noise all day and have their retinas burned out by the RGB. This I'm very interested in and very much looking forward to building. And that's a $275 case. That would be sort of on my upper limit personally. You know, dropping $500 on a case. Holy moly, are you kidding me? Now granted, with the Lian Li 011 plus the liquid cooler, plus the additional side fans and lower fans, we're at over $500 for all of that. But at least I'm getting a cooler. This is not coming with a cooler. If they gave me a cooler, a liquid cooler with it, I mean a really good one, like a 420, one of the Raijin coolers from ASUS, and that was built into the price, I could swallow that. But just an empty case, you've got to know that's massive and it's heavy. I don't even know if they list the weight here. 45.9 pounds. Hey, Mara, that's more than half of a Mara right there.
Yes.
You bet you like it, don't you? You want that case, don't you?
That was all right. I'm just bored with the rectangles.
Hey, they have a used one for $435. What a bargain. You can save $50 and maybe be missing some parts and have some scratches. Or maybe it's just fine. But if you want to send it back, you'll be loading a 46-pound case back into the box and hauling it back to the UPS store for a return.
Well,
at least you don't pay for it.
it.
Yeah, no. Yeah, no. Yeah.
I'm just, why has it always got to be a rectangle?
Why has it got to be a rectangle or a cube?
The cube is a little bit more or let's say it's a little bit more more rare.
I do
guess.
I do like the Segatep case that we've got your most recent build.
Yeah.
And I do like the red and black Gamdius case we're
Yeah,
using for
yeah,
the streamer.
That's okay. Yeah.
I like it. It's easy to work on. It looks good.
Like rounded rectangles, I guess.
I kind of like that Asia horse case if it just gave me more USB ports. It's weird looking.
It's not terrible.
It looks full otherworldly. That's
Sort of.
Yeah.
Sort of. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna go back over to the chat and see what I'm missing here because I've been full screen on Amazon. Wonder why he asked for Amazon gift cards. I think he has an addiction. Yeah, probably do. But I do it for you. He's really sick. And when the forklift breaks, Phil Stodd says, you'll have to call me to fix it. There you go, for sure. AC's Drafting says, if you're changing a tire, you could put it under the car for protection. Maybe the new Thermal Take Tower 600. Here's the problem that I saw, Mike, was the Tower, was it a Tower 500? When that arrived, the box was as big, well, not as big as this table, but if you cut this table in half, height-wise, width-wise, I didn't even open it up. I said, no way, this is way too big. I'm not building in this, and I immediately returned it. I didn't even open the tape on the box. A Tower 600 sounds like it's even bigger. It's way, way, way too, now maybe I should go look, but based on my prior experience, the Tower 100 was the single largest mini ITX case I've ever built in. The Tower 300 is the single largest mini ATX case I've ever built in. A regular full-size ATX board should fit in a Tower 300, and it doesn't. So I feel like Thermaltake makes excessively large cases. They're good value for what they charge for them, but man, you better have some. We all can't have your upper body strength, Mike. You might pick that up with one hand and go, I don't know what the big deal is. But I'm telling you, picking that Thermaltake helicopter buildup, ooh-wee. You know, or that Cosmos 2 case, I might have been able to pull that off 10 years ago, but my upper body strength isn't getting any stronger. My laying down strength is getting stronger. I'm getting much better at that as I get older. And one day, I'll master it. Nick Caffrey says, a geometric case is definitely for you, Mara. Michael Fogelstead says, Cosmos, I believe, was Cooler Master, not Corsair. You are correct. That is right. That's probably why I couldn't find it. It's Cooler Master. Now that you've said it, I realize my mistake. Let's type up in Google's Amazon search, Cooler Master. Cooler Master makes some good quality cases too. I think Mitch Morrison's still running an original Cooler Master, what we call the Stormtrooper case, black and white. Cooler Master, I'm just going to type in case because I don't think they call it a Cosmos anymore. Now I realize I'm not sharing the screen with you yet because I'm sure me scrolling can get people nauseous, so I'll just let you get nauseous from me directly. Ooh, that's an ugly case. The Cooler Master Encore 100, I really did like that build. Very unique, very different, small, mini ITX, easy to work on. If the cooler ever goes out, I don't know how I'm ever going to replace it because it's proprietary to the case. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. Yeah, you know, I'm not seeing. I swear I saw it while I was searching last night at cases. $30-year, oh wow, they do make it. Are you sitting down? Everybody sit down. Sit down, class. You're about to, it's shocked out of your seat. For just $1,409, you too can be the proud owner of the Cooler Master 30th year anniversary Cosmos Infinity. That's the C700M EATX full tower, which includes a PL360 Flux closed loop all-in-one CPU liquid cooler, a 1300 watt power supply, and a 120 millimeter ARGB fans bare bone. Look at that. What is bare bone? That usually refers to a motherboard. Oh, you get a case badge, a numbered case badge, 1 of 999. Dual loop pump, ARGB, okay. All right, addressable RGB, yeah, well, I don't know why you're making a big deal of that. 80 plus platinum is a pretty high-end power supply. Mobius 120p fan, unique air balance fan featuring interconnecting blades, angled inner fan frame, rim, Bose air intake. Okay, I don't care. Revamped motherboard tray, all right. High efficiency cables with Japanese inline capacitors. Really? The cables have... Oh, in the power supply. Okay, yeah. What is this? Socket compatibility. Oh boy. Why are there two? Why are there two pumps here? Two radiators. I don't understand. How do you put, what do you put one pump on top of another pump? What's this for? Well, there's power for everything right there. 1300 watt power supply, and a standard American circuit in a house is only 1500 watts. Good luck making that work. Isn't it 15 amps times 120 volts? Is it 1800 or is it 1500? I can never remember. Anyway, I hope you're not plugging a laser printer into the same circuit. That's all I'm trying to say. Wow. Okay, what if you just want the case and forget all the nonsense? That can be had for just $949 US. How many would you like? It's got some reviews. Oh, I guess I can't read the reviews without signing in. What kind of racket is that? Now here's the Cosmos 700p. Look at the price difference. Honestly, I think this one looks better. So the C700p versus the C700M. One says Cooler Master like it's a pair of sneakers with a cheap plastic front. The other one looks like a much nicer, more elegant front. No, probably still cheap plastic. Oh, that seems much more doable. How much does this weigh? .2 kilograms. So 22.2 kilograms. Is about 49 pounds. Woo! That's more than half a Mara. That's how they need to measure things. How many Maras is that? Wow. Holy moly. Yeah, so Cooler Master, that is the right answer and why I wasn't finding that before. Let me go back full screen. I guess I don't need to have it here on camera 2 anymore. We know where we're at on this. Everything's loaded up, Windows updates, drivers. I need to pick a case. That's what we've been looking at and why we've been looking, along with a cooler to go with it. Preferably a liquid cooler front-mounted 360. That's what I'm picturing in my head, but I'm open to suggestions if it's worth it for a specific look or design that's unique, and specifically to a manufacturer that's new to us, or at least a case design that's new to us, but isn't going to weigh 50 pounds or take up 3/4 of my desk because they went this way instead of this way. I'd rather it was taller than wider, personally. That being said, we still love all your suggestions, even if they're not ones we use in this build. You might be planting a seed for us to consider for a future build, regardless of, it's just that I already had this pictured in my head, right? But if I start thinking of a case that, say for example, the fans have to go on top, maybe I'm building something with an air cooler and that won't matter so much. So we still might use it for a future build. Don't be discouraged if I'm like, yeah, I don't think that works. That I'm being very specific with what I'm working with today, but showing me the idea gives me future projects to consider. Now that I know it exists, I can keep that in consideration when selecting parts. So I always appreciate the suggestions. Don't be disappointed or feel bad if I'm like, yeah, it's not going to work. I appreciate your suggestion. Remember, I am turning down more cases than I'm accepting. So you're going to have to, get up to bat and swing a few times. You're not going to hit the ball every time. Don't be discouraged. How many pounds maximum pounds do I prefer? Usually, when I ship a computer, it weighs between 35 and 40 pounds total with the parts in it. Now, when you're adding a liquid cooler, you're going to be adding some weight to it. If you're adding a lot of RGB stuff, or the case is going to be physically larger, the way physics works, it's going to be heavier. So, unless the building materials are really cheap. Generally speaking, most computers that I build and sell, even if they're mini ITX, micro ATX, or full-size ATX, don't weigh any more than 45 pounds tops. That's with everything loaded in them. And when the cases are empty, they're usually closer to 25 pounds tops. We're adding a lot of weight with the motherboard. And, just this motherboard alone weighs like 3 pounds. That's before I put stuff on it. Not that anything other than the cooler really weighs much, and that's coming off anyway. However, that being said, things get moved around, and I don't have a butler. So if I need to move things around, I need to do it. And I'm telling you, these old cases, the bigger, heavier, older cases, are sitting right where I left them, where the smaller, more standardized cases have been moved around several times here in Studio C. You know what hasn't been moved? The Xenos build, even though it's little, that sucker is heavy. For me to lift that takes everything I've got, and I want to put it down as soon as possible. So it doesn't get moved very often. It's not really where I want it, but I don't know where I want it. If it was lighter, I would move it aside somewhere else, depending on my mood. But now I really need to think about how many times I want to lift that. I want to be careful when I set it down because I don't want to dent the floor or the top of the desk with the metal feet. If it's a Cosmos build, like that 700, there's no way I'm lifting that alone. I need somebody else. Somebody's going to have to grab one side, and I'm going to grab one side once it has parts in it. At 50 pounds empty, I can lift it. That's no problem. But the minute we put the motherboard, liquid cooler, and we add the weight to it, it wouldn't be smart for me to lift that. Because if my back goes out, I'm down for 6 weeks in excruciating pain over some male egotistical pride, which was fine when I was younger, but it ain't worth it today to be laid up in bed because I refused to ask for help to move a case. If the case had casters or wheels on it, mostly just moving them around, not necessarily, do I have to lift them up onto anything? It's just, in order to move these cases, I have to lift them up or I'm going to scratch the floor dragging them. We have a brand new floor here in Studio C. So I'm going to lift it off the floor, take it to where I want it, set it back on the floor. In Mara's office, she has the big Apache helicopter. That is extraordinarily heavy. I'll grab the back, Mara will grab the front. It'll be very easy for us together to move it. It will go on this bench so I can work on it. And when I'm done working on it, it goes back on the floor. Well, heck, if that thing had wheels. Now look, I know you can buy little stands that cases can fit in and you can wheel them around, but they're all for skinny towers. So if they're going to build a 50-pound case, it should automatically include locking wheels, just like this table has. It's a big, heavy table. You position it where you want it, you push the lever on the wheel, and it locks the wheel. If they're going to build cases that big and that heavy, they need to come with lockable wheels, period. then I'm fine with them. Then I'm going to roll them over from this side to that side. And the only time I'm going to lift them is if I have to work on them. And quite frankly, this table has a crank on it. I can lower the table so I don't have to lift it that far. But I will tell you, when my back goes out, it does it without a warning. It's not like I start feeling it and I go, oh, I better put this down. No, I'm picking it up. I feel fine. And then snap, it's done. Never knew it was coming. I don't know how much, I'm not sure how much weight I have to pick up before it snaps. 50 pounds or so is fine. But the minute we exceed that, I am risking it every single time. And I will be down for 6 weeks. So that's why I'm making a big deal out of this. Now, if I had a few kids running around here that were strong enough, I'd just make them do it. That's what my parents did. Go mow the lawn. Go clean the pool. That's what you have kids for, isn't it? Get the chores done. Wash the dishes. I don't know. Maybe you were raised differently than me. Get a cherry picker, right? For sure. An engine lift. Subaru Mike's got a couple of those laying around. Chancey says between 35 and 40 pounds, it'd be hard to find, but it really isn't. Like if you look at the vast majority of builds we've done here, like in the NZXT cases, the Cooler Master cases, the Corsair cases, the Fantex cases, they all fall in that range. That's where that number comes from. I didn't just make it up. It's only recently that cases have started becoming heavier. There was always heavy cases, don't get me wrong. There was always these large server cases and always the Cosmos, you know, but those were the exceptions. Now, with the dual chamber cases, aquarium style cases with all the heavy glass on them, cases are getting heavier and they're taking up more desk space now than ever before. Well, in the meantime, many PCs are getting smaller. I'll be happy when this dual chambered tempered glass aquarium phase is over with. Probably in another 2 years, we'll be done with that and we'll move on to something else. But right now, we're in the middle of this fad. But I guarantee, I promise you, this fad isn't going to last very long. People just don't have it's impractical. Budget-wise, the amount of space it takes up is impractical. Most of us don't have that much extra space. If anything, you know, here in America, we have too much stuff. And it's going to grow tiring. It's fun, it's a novelty, it's different. And then it's like, ugh, this thing is heavy, it takes up a lot of space, I won't do that again. That's where we're heading, I promise you. What comes next, I don't know. It may be more of a mini PC craze. And all these cases will be considered dinosaurs very soon. That much is, I'm pretty sure of. I wanted to say sure and certain. Pretty certain. All right, I am way over my time today, but I appreciate your suggestions. And of course, thanks for Mike's unboxing how-to and review channel here for joining us, hanging out in the chat. Thanks to our friend Buster, of course, and Paul Gray. Thanks to Charlie Purdy and also to Oystein and Frankie B. For all of you as members and all of your super chat contributions, Peter VZ out there in Amsterdam, super chatting us regularly, Alan Lindas, all of you, thank you so much. And for those of you just hanging out in the chat, conversing with us, thank you. Thank you for being kind and supportive individuals and being a part of this amazing community we've created here. And with your help and your suggestions, we're going to get this figured out. So this is going to get set aside. And we're going to revisit the 9900X as soon as the new case and fans come in, which I think is tomorrow. I'm going to try to get the Max Tang BIOS update done tomorrow, which I think resolves our secure boot issue. I do believe that is not an issue we could have fixed. I do believe the manufacturer dropped the ball here. Hopefully they didn't send them all out that way. Hopefully I just got a prototype that slipped through the cracks. I don't know. I also don't know for sure this is the fix, but I'm pretty sure this fixes it. And I'm also pretty sure because it's a BIOS update, we cannot provide our own BIOS updates. They need to be provided to us. This was emailed to me. It's not on a download page. So if this works, my follow-up question to Max Tang is, did this go out to customers? And if so, where can customers get that BIOS update? If that solves the problem, all those customers are going to need it. And we want to raise awareness to potential owners of these machines to do this. So we're going to try and cover that tomorrow. Friday, a week from today, we have that ASUS ProArt build that the Ultra 9. Yeah. And before Friday, somewhere between Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we've got that Leon Lee 011 so we can finish the 9700X all-white build. And while all of that's going on, in the background, off camera, we'll be picking a case and cooler for this so that the week after that, hopefully, between Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we can build this one. And then that Friday, we have the live Mixer Z890 board from ASRock with another Ultra 7. So we are fully stocked up. We also have our friends from Acronis joining us. The folks at Miniswarm are going to have a big Black Friday sale. And we're going to make a video as soon as possible once we have the information, because we know a lot of the hot items are going to sell out. And we want to make sure you guys get, if you're watching the video when it's live, you'll be some of the first to know so that you have the opportunity to buy it without going, I missed the deal. I'm telling you right now, on the 24th of November, we're making a video about the sale at Miniswarm. And if you're looking for a really good deal where the systems are probably going to sell out, I like Miniswarm. I use Miniswarm. I have no problem recommending Miniswarm. And if you can get it cheaper, all the better. As much as I like pizza, when someone else is, if I got a coupon or someone else is paying for it, it just tastes a little better. Anyway, I just want to give you the heads up. That's what's coming up. We've been very busy. We're going to be very busy right up until the end of this year. And I'm super excited because for a while there, I was like, do I have content today? Well, I got content coming out my ears. So we should be making a lot of videos just so I can get caught up. Watch for daily content here, minus days where I have personal errands to run. Other than that, I've got content to be making, and I hope you'll be joining us. We are typically live every day, but especially on Fridays at 1 p.m. Arizona time, which is currently 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. Right now in Arizona, it's 4:30 p.m. That's 6:30 on the East Coast, and it's an hour earlier, 3:30 in California on the West Coast. I don't know where you're watching in the world, but there's your math. If you're watching live, that's our current time. I want to thank SCD Keys for offering you the 30% discount and continuing that throughout the end of the year for Windows and Office license keys. They do accept PayPal. All the coupon codes and links are in our video description as always. All the parts we used in today's video are in the video description. We paid for everything you see. All of this. We paid for this, we paid for this, we paid for this, we paid for the keyboard, we paid for the stand. None of this was sent to us for free, and none of it would have been possible without your memberships and your contributions. The more we get, the more we put it back into the channel. So just so you know, ASRock doesn't even know my name. They've never sent us a thing. I like their products. I'm going to recommend their products, not because I'm getting paid by them, because I'm not. Not because I'm getting free products from them, because I'm not, nor have I ever. I wouldn't turn them down if they offered. But I'm not holding my breath, and I'm not holding my content up. So long as we have the budget, we're putting it all right back into the channel. And you can see it. You don't have to wonder if I'm enriching myself. You can see it's going to the builds. We do look for local buyers to buy these builds. Shipping has gotten out of hand. Things are breaking, taking longer to ship, and it's costing $200 on average to mail a computer now. That defeats any savings or point in doing it, and support becomes impossible. But if you're in the Phoenix area and you want to inquire about having a computer that you see on the channel, reach out to our reach out to our direct email address. which I will put up on the screen here just as we're about to wrap things up. Let me, I have to find it. Hold on a second. Let me turn that off and turn that off. I have a link here. There it is. And it may be hard to read, so let me turn the screen black. I could just resize myself above it, can't I? Just go like that. There. Now you can see me and it. That's how you can reach out to us directly. If you're a member, please let us know you're a member, because we prioritize responses to members first. And then if you're a regular viewer with a question, comment, or suggestion, you're welcome to email us as well. We try to get to everybody. It does get a little hectic with the size of the channel. Some days are slow and some days are busy. If you haven't heard back from us within 24 hours, we probably didn't get your message. Try sending it again. If you've tried 3 or 4 times and you're not getting a response, there may be another issue. However, we do try to get back to everybody, with a priority being on our members. Members also get access to members-only videos. Every Monday we go live at the same time, 1 p.m. Phoenix time, 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. Those videos are only for members, always and only. They're never made public. It's a smaller crowd, so it's a little more intimate, and it's a lot less formal. So we get to hang out, just talk about what's coming, and sometimes I show some repairs or upgrades that I don't make available to the regular channel in order to entice people to become members. Any videos that are older than 12 months old are part of our archive. You need to be a member to access the archive. We're welcome to give these videos out for free, but at some point it starts costing us money, and we have to reduce our expenses in order to, not only optimize the search engine. It doesn't do us much good, honestly, to have a video on how to install Windows 7. It's just taking up space in the library. It's overcrowding. But it also doesn't necessarily make sense for us to delete it. And it's a video that maybe gets 1 view every other month. So we just throw everything into an archive, and we say, look, if you want videos going all the way back to 2009, that's a benefit of membership. If you want priority response to contact with us, that's a benefit of membership. If you want personal support or help, comes with membership. The people that enable us to do what we're doing, we want to enable them to do what they're doing. And as far as everybody else, we try and help you as best we can within the time constraints that we have. And we encourage you to reach out if you have any questions or concerns. But do know that we are trying to make sure members are getting their money's worth, and making sure that there's a reason to become a member that's beneficial to the member, not just to the channel. And well, many of our members are like, hey, you don't have to give me anything. You just keep doing what you're doing, and we appreciate it. We also feel better when we can return the favor back to those who do the same for us. So you're never bothering us. We enjoy talking with the members and helping the members, because it should be a reciprocal relationship. And when it becomes one-sided, that's where things are very difficult to sustain over a period of time. But with the help of our viewers and our members, we are making do. We're not getting rich, but we're able to keep doing what we love doing. And so long as that support is there, we have content. We are still reaching out to companies we want to work with in the hopes that they'll reconsider. A lot of companies are pulling back from sponsorships because customers aren't buying. It just kind of depends on the company, and it depends on the economic situation that we're in. When there's a lot of YouTube channels to pick from in this genre, sponsors can kind of pick and choose who they want to be with. But as more and more channels are closing up because it's not financially viable for most channels anymore, where we weren't considered before, we might be just who's left. In that case, they might reconsider. So we're still reaching out to companies we want to work with. We are turning down companies who we don't want to work with, who reach out to us. That's a daily thing from a lot of Alibaba stuff, a lot of AliExpress stuff. People with, they have no idea who we are. They want us to review, Apple iPhone chargers. Like, I don't think you know who I am. So we do get a lot of inquiry to that, where they want us to review their product. It's a back massager. Like, I'm not reviewing back massagers. I don't think you know who we saw your channel and we love your content. We'd like to send you a foot massager. I don't think you have ever seen my content. That's the same email they send out to all the content creators. We get tons of those, tons of them. The ones we want to get, you know, companies like Logitech or ASRock, crickets. But we keep trying, and hopefully we'll get through, because we'd love to showcase products that we use anyway. If we can work with these companies, it'd be great. If ASRock would send me the board instead of me paying for it, obviously I'd like that. But nonetheless, I have to make sure that when I'm reviewing something, I'm being open and honest about it. And companies that are paying for that, they don't necessarily want you to be open and honest unless it's all positive. Otherwise, why would they pay you to put their product out? So what we're doing here, it's very important that we can remain independent, and we wouldn't be able to do that without you. That's going to wrap it up for me for today. Thanks to Mara, as always, for all the work she does in the background, like, you know, dealing with all the potential, I don't want to say sponsors, but companies we might be able to work with. And maybe someday a sponsorship, we'll see. In the meantime, thanks to each and every one of you for hanging out with us today. Again, as a reminder, check out Mike's unboxing, reviews, and how-to. He is in the UK, so there, if you're an American like me, you might see some products there that we can't buy. But nonetheless, most of it is pretty well internationally sold. And his approach to content is very similar to mine, though he doesn't normally go on for 4 hours like I do. That may be a good thing. He's also a lot more clean shaven. That'll wrap it up for me for today. Thank you for hanging out. Again, a thank you to our friend Paul Gray. I want to look one more time and shout out one more time for the Amazon gift cards. Oh, our friend Frankie B sent an Amazon gift card. Once again, a very generous individual. He said, here's a little something, enjoy. Again, thank you to Ron Barnish, as well as William Denton and Paul Gray, who sent 2, and our friend Alan Lindus and Mark Gaines. You guys rock. And for all your super chats and your memberships. I see AC's Drafting just became a supporter here. Thank you so much. We've seen AC's Drafting in our community for a number of years and helped us with designing our GPU removal tool, which you no longer need with these quick release mechanisms. So there you go. You got to move quick in this industry or, you know, obsolete. But he put some time into that and he did a great job. And we did make some prototypes and it just never happened because everything just moves too fast. That'll wrap it up. Thanks again to Luke Greenia. Of course, Mike's Unboxing, Mortant. I'm just looking in the chat room here. Matthew Burden, Phil Stodd, all of you rock. Charlie Purdy. I apologize if I'm not mentioning your name. Please don't take it personally. When we do these live on Unscripted, it's just right what's in front of my face. Gregory Howard, see, he got in there. Thanks, you guys. I'll see you all again tomorrow with the Max Tang update. I hope you're going to join me then. I do plan on starting at my usual time. Until next time, bye for now.